Chapter 383. The 100 Gate, Qingyun Peak. Returning to Qingyun Peak unimpeded, Yu Haoran couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief as he looked at the familiar surroundings. The black bear, a divine guardian beast of the 5th rank and 7th rank, was a trump card that he had prepared in advance to deal with Zhao Ji. This was because when he had just returned to the 100 Feet sect, the pagoda spirit who had used his divine sense to check on the 100 Feet peak suddenly told him that Zhao Ji had not only broken through to the peak of the 6th grade martial royal realm, but had also advanced to the peak of the 7th grade martial royal realm. According to Thaling's judgment, with his current speed of breaking through to the next realm, it would take him at most 1 to 2 hours to successfully break through to the 8th rank. Zhao Sinyu's mother was the deputy pavilion master of the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion. With the enormous wealth and omnipotent means accumulated by the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion, it was not difficult to help a person quickly increase their cultivation. Moreover, Zhao Ji himself was a top genius with outstanding talent and potential. In 4 days, his cultivation had directly increased by more than a small realm. Then, by the time the faction summit was held, Zhao Ji's cultivation was very likely to be at the peak of the 8th rank, or even the peak of the 9th rank. Thinking that even Zhao Sinyu could take out a magic weapon to restrict the secret transformation technique, then Zhao Ji, who had a higher status, stronger strength, and greater value, would probably be taken out by the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion, who was of a higher level and more threatening. Therefore, he didn't expose Black Bear's existence for the time being, because he was worried that if his ability to transform into a strange beast was restricted, Black Bear could be used as a trump card to turn the situation around. Black Bear, the atmosphere in the sect has been quite tense recently. Stay with me for the time being. As he walked towards the Hidden Moon Pavilion, Yu Haoran explained to Black Bear, "Wait until I've solved the problems in the sect. Then I'll arrange a new place for you to live." "I'll do as you say," Black Bear replied respectfully. "Of course, I won't treat you badly if you stay with me for the time being. I'll think of a way to let you directly advance to the 8th rank of the 5th rank, or even the peak of the 8th rank in a short time." Yu Haoran turned his head and looked at the black bear that completely treated him as a servant. He decided to give it some benefits for the time being. After all, this black bear that had inherited the bloodline of the ancient Black Sea of Death Divine Beast before him possessed extraordinary talent and potential. If he nurtured it well, it could become his right-hand man in the future. Thank you for your guidance. For Yu Haoran's guarantee just now, although Black Bear's attitude of gratitude was very respectful, his tone was not very excited. Black Bear understood his own potential better than anyone else. Ever since he had stepped into the peak of the 7th rank of the 5th step, his cultivation had not improved at all in the past 20 years. No matter how many precious elixirs he took, no matter how many risks he took to break through, he never succeeded. And the reason for all of this was because of the divine beast bloodline that it had inherited. This was because the divine beast bloodline that it had inherited gave it the ability to challenge opponents of a higher rank, but also greatly limited the speed at which it could level up. According to its current speed of leveling up, it would take at least 10 years to break through the peak of the 7th rank of the 5th rank. From Black Bear's calm tone, Yu Haoran knew that it did not believe that he had a way to help it break through the peak of the 7th rank of the 5th rank of the 5th rank in a short time. In this regard, Yu Haoran did not explain too much, because whether or not he could help it break through the current rank was far more convincing than a verbal explanation. "Eldest senior brother, why are you here?" Just as Yu Haoran brought Black Bear to the Hidden Moon Pavilion, he unexpectedly saw Chu Zhongyu standing anxiously in front of the courtyard of the Hidden Moon Pavilion. "Nine junior brother, you're finally back." Hearing the familiar voice, Chu Zhongyu quickly turned around. After seeing that it was Yu Haoran, Chu Zhongyu let out a long sigh of relief and called out excitedly, "Eldest senior brother, what happened?" Yu Haoran asked as he reached out to open the courtyard door. "Ninth junior brother, the peak master of the law enforcement peak, Gao Wanping, is here." Yu Haoran, who was about to step into the courtyard, suddenly stopped when he heard Chu Zhongyu mention Gao Wanping. Then, he turned his head and asked, "Eldest senior brother, when did he come?" Almost half a day ago, Chu Zhongyu replied. Did he go to the peace residence? Yu Haoran asked nervously. Gao Wamping had been here for half a day. After all, Master was now in a state of coma due to self-healing, and Gao Wamping was a martial emperor expert. If he was suspicious and used his divine thought to check on Master's condition, he was afraid that he would expose Qingyun Peak's greatest predicament. No, Chu Zhongyu shook his head and hurriedly explained. After the Peak Master found out that you went out to train, he stood on the enlightenment stone at the peak and said that he was waiting for you there. Black Bear, stay in the courtyard for the time being. Hearing that Gao Wanping had been waiting for him at the enlightenment stone at the peak, Yu Haoran instructed Black Bear. Hearing Yu Haoran's instructions before entering the mountain gate, Black Bear only nodded and did not speak to avoid exposing his true identity. Eldest senior brother, you go back to the Qingju Pavilion first. I'm going to see Gao Wamping now. Ninth junior brother, do you need me to accompany you? Thinking of the grudges between Yu Haoran, the law enforcement peak, and Gao Wamping, Chu Zhongyu suggested worriedly. No, Gao Wamping is here to seek cooperation this time. He won't hurt me. Shaking his head, Yu Haoran rejected Chu Zhongyu's good intentions. Then, using the martial technique of the 7 changes of the Flood Dragon, he transformed into a 10-meter-long Flood Dragon. Then, he stepped on the Flood Dragon and flew directly to the peak of Qingyun Peak. Looking at the Flood Dragon under Yu Haoran's feet that was similar to the 9 levels of the legendary Flood Dragon, Chu Zhongyu was stunned. Stepping on a divine dragon and roaming the horizon was probably the dream of every martial artist. He did not expect Ninth Junior Brother to be able to do this when he was only a martial master. Ninth Junior Brother is no ordinary person. In the end, Chu Zhongyu could only sigh enviously and turn to leave the Hidden Moon Pavilion. As for the black bear that Yu Haoran had brought back, he did not take it seriously at all. After all, for a strange beast like the black bear that was famous for its strength, the bigger its size, the higher its grade and strength. It was only 2 meters tall and had probably just entered the ranks of strange beasts. However, he did not know why Ninth Junior Brother had brought back an ordinary strange beast. Stepping on the Flood Dragon, Yu Haoran quickly arrived at the peak of Qingyun Peak. When he saw Gao Wanping standing on the Enlightenment Stone, he controlled the Flood Dragon under his feet and quickly approached the Enlightenment Stone. Although he did not use his divine consciousness to observe the situation, as a martial royal expert, Gao Wanping had already noticed when Yu Haoran used the martial technique of the 7 changes of the Flood Dragon to transform into a Flood Dragon. When he saw the Flood Dragon that Yu Haoran transformed into not only was 90% similar to the legendary Flood Dragon, but he was also able to use the Flood Dragon to fly as a martial master. Even though Gao Wanping was a martial royal, he was still shocked. Chapter 384. Qingyun Peak. Yu Haoran greets Peak Master. When he was less than 10 meters away from the Tao Enlightenment Stone, Yu Haoran immediately dispersed the dragon formed from his elemental energy. Then, he used his elemental energy to control his body and slowly landed in front of Gao Wanping. Junior Yu, although I know that your potential is extremely outstanding and comparable to that of the top evildoers, I'm afraid that your previous move was not just because of your potential. Gao Wanping could not help but praise the courteous Yu Haoran, who did not have the slightest trace of the tyranny and rudeness he had displayed when he had charged into Enforcer Peak previously. Peak Master, you're too kind. It was just a small trick. As they exchanged pleasantries, Yu Haoran climbed onto the Enlightenment Stone. Junior Yu, do you know why the stone beneath our feet is called the Enlightenment Stone? When Gao Wanping saw that Yu Haoran didn't want to talk about how he used his essence force to transform into a flying flood dragon, he knew that there must be some kind of secret technique involved. Therefore, he tactfully didn't bring it up. Then he inexplicably shifted the topic to the ordinary bluestone rock beneath their feet. I don't know. Shaking his head, Yu Haoran indicated that he was not very clear about it. At the same time, he also expressed his master's fondness for this bluestone. But I know that when Master is free, he often comes to this enlightenment stone at the peak of the mountain and sits there for an entire day. Of course, because this enlightenment stone was moved from the trial peak to commemorate a person who has done us a favor. Bending down and stroking the blue stone beneath his feet, Gao Wanping sank into his memories. 60 years ago, Peak Master Gao Wanping, Qingyun Peak Master Feng Qingyun, Sect Master Zhao Ji, Vice Sect Master Zhong Fakin and Lai Yin, Sunset Peak Master Li Chun, and the deceased Long Aoyun, 7 people became disciples of the 100 Qi Gate at the same time. At that time, there were thousands of new disciples who took part in the talent test. Only these 7 disciples had the most outstanding talent, potential, comprehension, and perseverance. They all had the potential to become martial sages in the early stages. At this point, Gao Wanping stood up and looked at Yu Haoran. Martial nephew Yu, 60 years ago, the competition between the factions of the 100 Qi Gate was not as intense as it is now. Moreover, the way they trained their disciples was different from now. At that time, the sect did not allow the various factions to recruit disciples they liked in advance. Every new disciple who had just entered the sect had to cultivate for a period of time at the trial peak. Only when their cultivation had broken through to the martial master realm could they choose to join a different faction. After saying this, Gao Wanping glanced at the Zhengping residence by Qi Peak, Rising Dragon Peak, and Dust Peak of Qingyun Peak before he continued with a warm expression. Because the 7 of them have similar talent and potential, are of the same age, and entered the sect at the same time. Therefore, among the new disciples of the trial peak, the relationship between the 7 of them was especially good. It seems that 3 months after they entered the sect, under the suggestion of Long Aoyun, who had the highest prestige and strength, the 7 of them were ranked according to their age. Among them, Long Aoyun was the eldest senior brother, Zhao Ji was the second senior brother, Lai Yin was the third senior brother, Gao Wanping was the 4th, Zhong Fakin was the 5th, Li Chun was the 6th, and Feng Qingyun was the 7th. In just 1 year and 5 months, the 7 of them all successfully broke through to the martial master realm in less than a month's time. Originally, they had agreed to join the same faction so that they could continue to support each other and grow together. However, 3 days before they were promoted to inner disciples, an accident suddenly happened to their eldest senior brother, who was able to unite them. This caused them to choose different factions due to their different personalities and preferences, which eventually led to the current situation. The enlightenment stone beneath our feet is the green stone that Long Aoyun sat on when he was cultivating. At this point, Gao Wanping sighed, then looked at Yu Haoran and said, "AI, martial nephew Yu, I've been the peak master of the enforcement peak for close to 20 years. With the deep accumulation of the enforcement peak for close to 1,000 years, do you think I have no way of dealing with you just by transforming into a rank 5 exotic beast?" Hearing the arrogance in Gao Wanping's tone, Yu Haoran asked in return, "So you're saying that you let me off in the end because of my master?" Half. Gao Wanping neither admitted nor denied it. Once again, he skipped the topic and suddenly changed the topic to Zhao Ji. 3 days ago, the vice peak master of the 100 Feet Peak, who is also the sect master Zhao Ji's cousin, Zhao Ying, suddenly came to find me. Not only did she take out many precious treasures, she also promised many conditions that I couldn't refuse. She only had one request: join forces to deal with me, or rather, join forces to deal with my master. Yu Haoran guessed, following Gao Wanping's words. "Martial nephew, you're very smart." Gao Wanping smiled and nodded, then suddenly said after praising him, "However, I rejected them on the spot." "What?" Yu Haoran asked, puzzled. If no one knew that Feng Qingyun was already a martial saint, everyone would have chosen the stronger Zhao Ji, who represented the 100-Foot Gate's orthodox lineage. Since Gao Wanping rejected them on the spot, it meant that he either knew his master's true cultivation, or there were other reasons. Thinking of how Feng Qingyun hid his strength, Yu Haoran believed that Gao Wanping shouldn't know that his master was already a martial saint expert. There could only be other reasons. What? After hearing Yu Haoran's question, Gao Wanping couldn't help but ask angrily. "Because I want Zhao Ji to die." "Why?" Yu Haoran continued asking. Combined with the grafted demonic arts that Gao Wanping used on Ouyang Haoyu, as well as Ouyang Haoyu's achievements in his previous life, it meant that he didn't have any ambitions for the 100 Qi Gates sect master position. Then if he wanted Zhao Ji to die, it could only mean that there was a grudge between the two of them. Martial nephew Yu, I just told you that the reason why the 7 of them were able to unite was because of senior brother Long Aoyun's charisma. At that time, although the potential of the 7 of us was about the same, because of my innate physique, my cultivation and strength were far behind the other 6. This caused Zhao Ji, Lai Yin, and Zhong Fakin to be extremely dissatisfied. Because in their eyes, with my cultivation speed, I didn't deserve to be called brothers with them. Zhao Ji even proposed to remove me from the 7 of them. But not only did senior brother refuse, he even took out the cultivation resources given to him by the sect to help me increase my cultivation and strength. In order to let me catch up to the cultivation speed of the other 5 people, he took risks more than once to bring me deep into the mountains to train. At least 5 times, senior brother almost lost his life. In my heart, senior brother is not only an elder brother, but also in existence like a loving father. He is the person that Gao Wanping admires the most in his life, and also the only person that I admire. But I never thought that the murderer of senior brother's accident was actually Zhao Ji. The reason was only because of an 8-step, first-rank talent pill that could increase one's talent and potential. Martial Uncle Gao, what do you want to do? While disdaining Zhao Ji's character, Yu Haoran also changed the way he addressed Zhao Ji to express his attitude. Martial nephew Yu, do you know why Zhao Ji called for the sect summit in advance this time? Chapter 385. There were only 2 chapters left, and they would only be updated after 9 o'clock in the evening. Qingyan Peak Summit. 100 feet peak. Qingyan Peak. Sect Deathmatch. Yu Haoran said, word by word. Martial nephew Yu, I'm beginning to wonder what your brain is made of. How could you be so smart? Gao Wanping said in surprise when he saw that Yu Haoran had guessed the purpose of Zhao Ji's sect summit. After all, Yu Haoran was very young and had not been a disciple of the 100 Qi Gate for long. He did not know much about the secrets of the sect. To be able to guess the real purpose of Zhao Ji's sect summit through some clues was enough to show how smart he was. However, when he saw Yu Haoran's calm expression, he did not continue to talk nonsense. That's right. One of the purposes of Zhao Ji's sect summit in advance was to have the sect deathmatch between 100 Feet Peak and Qingyan Peak. Then, through the influence of the sect deathmatch, he could suppress the other sects in the sect and completely unify the 100 Qi Gate. It seems that Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion has given Zhao Ji a lot of support this time. At first, Yu Haoran had only guessed that Zhao Ji intended to use the faction deathmatch to kill everyone in Qingyun's faction in order to avenge himself and his fellow disciple for destroying the 100 Feet Peak's treasury. However, he did not expect that Zhao Ji would actually use the influence of the faction deathmatch to intimidate the other factions in the sect and achieve his true goal of unifying the 100 Feet Gate. The sect wars in the 100 Qi Gate had been going on for decades. Neither Zhao Ji nor the previous sect leader had been able to suppress or eliminate the sect wars. Zhao Ji's sudden boldness could only mean that the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion behind him had given him enough support. Martial nephew Yu, Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion can only support him secretly. They can't openly support him. Otherwise, the 7 top sects will not let Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion off. Therefore, if Zhao Ji wants to use the influence of the sect deathmatch to suppress the sect wars and unify the sect, he must obtain the support of Enforcer Peak. Otherwise, he will be delusional to think about unifying the sect, Gao Wanping said confidently. Martial Uncle Gao, what if Zhao Ji's cultivation suddenly rises to the peak of 9th grade Martial Emperor? Yu Haoran, who was far less confident than Gao Wanping, suddenly mentioned Zhao Ji's cultivation. Impossible. Gao Wanping shook his head. At that time, among the 7 of us, only eldest senior brother's talent and potential were slightly better than ours. It was possible for him to break through to the peak of the 9th grade martial emperor realm at this age. The remaining 6 of us have similar aptitudes. I don't even have the confidence to improve my cultivation within 5 years. As for the peak of the 9th level of the martial royal realm, what virtue does Zhao Ji have? At this point, Gao Wanping suddenly thought of the heavenly fragrance pavilion behind Zhao Ji. Thinking of the enormous financial resources of the heavenly fragrance pavilion, he couldn't continue. Later, he thought of Zhao Ying's arrogance when facing him 2 days ago, and said with an expression of sudden realization, No wonder Zhao Ying said that I would regret it sooner or later when I rejected Zhao Ji's conditions. It turns out that her confidence lies here. Martial Uncle Gao, just tell me why you're here. Seeing that Gao Wanping had already guessed Zhao Ji's real means and confidence, Yu Haoran didn't want to continue the nonsense and asked directly. Force him to abdicate. Appoint a leader. Originally, he was still worried about whether Zhao Ji would suppress all the peak masters with the strength of the peak of the 9th level of the martial royal realm during the faction summit. However, when he suddenly saw Yu Haoran's calm expression without a trace of worry, he immediately knew that Yu Haoran had a way to deal with Zhao Ji. Therefore, he spoke of his purpose this time. Martial Uncle Gao, could it be that you have thoughts about the position of the sect master of the 100 Chi Gate? The faction life and death battle emphasized that the people of the 2 factions would fight to the death. In other words, as long as the life and death battle officially began, it would only end when the people of one side were all dead. If Yu Haoran's side lost in the life and death battle, then Zhao Ji could use the momentum of victory and then rely on the cultivation of the peak of the 9th level of the martial royal realm to completely suppress all the factions in the sect, thus unifying the entire 100 Chi Gate. If Yu Haoran's side won in the life and death battle, then the 100 Chi Gate would lose its legitimate sect master, Zhao Ji. Then, it would involve the battle for the position of sect master. The abdication that Gao Wanping mentioned just now was actually to force the 13 elders on the senior statesman's peak. This was because only the 13 elders could decide who the new sect master would be. Appointing a leader was to re-establish the new sect master of the 100 Chi Gate. Seeing that Yu Haoran had misunderstood his thoughts, Gao Wanping quickly shook his head and explained, Martial nephew Yu, you've misunderstood. I have no interest in the position of sect master. What I meant by appointing a leader was to recommend Martial nephew Yu to be the new sect master. Martial Uncle Gao, you're not interested in the position of sect master of the 100 Chi Gate. Do you think that I, Yu Haoran, am interested? Yu Haoran asked with a sneer. To become the sect master and lead hundreds of thousands of disciples of the 100 Chi Gate, dozens of affiliated sects, and millions of subordinates, it was an irresistible temptation for a young man like Yu Haoran. However, what Gao Wanping had never expected was that Yu Haoran would not even think about it and directly refuse. This made him admire Yu Haoran's temperament very much. Martial Uncle Gao, we've reached an agreement. I'll be responsible for killing Zhao Ji in the life and death battle, and you'll be responsible for forcing him to abdicate and appointing a leader. Since he already knew the real reason why Gao Wanping had come to find him, Yu Haoran did not want to delay any longer. He had to be fully prepared before the faction summit officially began. Therefore, he directly expressed his agreement to cooperate and made the decision to assign their respective tasks. Then, the 7 changes of the Flood Dragon transformed into a Flood Dragon and took him away from the Clear Cloud Peak, heading straight for the Hidden Moon Pavilion. Martial nephew Yu, it seems that you're the same as me. We're both ambitious people. This small 100 Chi Gate can't trap you and me. I, Gao Wanping, look forward to witnessing your growth in a wider world in the future. Looking at Yu Haoran leaving on the Flood Dragon, Gao Wanping muttered to himself with anticipation. Then, his face darkened and he looked at the 100 Chi Peak. It seems that I have to speed up the speed of Ouyang Haoyu's cultivation and strength. I have to use the grafted demonic skill to achieve fusion as soon as possible. The sun rose and the moon set. The moon rose and the sun set. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Chu Zhongyu came to the Hidden Moon Pavilion early and gently knocked on the courtyard door. Then, he found that the courtyard door wasn't locked. He reached out and pushed the door open, stepping into the courtyard. When he walked into the courtyard and saw Yu Haoran sitting in the pavilion, he was stunned. At this moment, Yu Haoran wasn't meditating and cultivating. He was just sitting there quietly, but his body emitted a trace of ethereal aura. This kind of ethereal aura meant that he was currently in a state of comprehension. This kind of comprehension could not only increase his cultivation and strength, it could also increase his mental state cultivation, and it could even increase his comprehension ability. Therefore, Chu Zhongyu didn't rashly go forward to disturb him. He just stood quietly in the courtyard. Time passed by minute. Yu Haoran, who was in a state of enlightenment, didn't show any signs of waking up. At this time, there were less than 3 minutes to the start of the faction summit. Thinking about how Zhao Ji suddenly called the faction summit in advance this time, it was very likely that it had a lot to do with Clear Cloud Peak and Yu Haoran. If they delayed the start of the faction summit, wouldn't it give Zhao Ji an excuse to make things difficult for them? Chapter 386. Qingyan Peak, Hidden Moon Pavilion. Just as Chu Zhongyu approached the pavilion, a black shadow flashed past his eyes, followed by a few strands of hair falling from the top of his head. Raising his head to look at the black rat that had returned to the stone table in the pavilion, then at the slowly falling strands of hair, Chu Zhongyu couldn't help but feel a trace of lingering fear. If that black shadow's attack had come a little closer, it wouldn't have been hair that was falling, but brain matter. It wasn't that Chu Zhongyu hadn't seen the black rat that had ambushed him earlier. Just as Yu Haoran returned to Hidden Moon Pavilion, he saw the black rat crawling on Yu Haoran's shoulder. However, considering that rats were the most ordinary of the thousands of exotic beasts in Tianxin continent, as well as the most useless of them all, he pretended not to see it, just like how he treated Black Bear. However, what Chu Zhongyu never expected was that the seemingly ordinary black rat actually possessed an extreme speed that even a martial king expert like him couldn't react to. At this moment, he didn't dare to underestimate the black rat anymore. "Eldest senior brother, you're here." Yu Haoran greeted Chu Zhongyu with a smile after finishing his cultivation. Actually, Yu Haoran had basically finished comprehending when Chu Zhongyu had just stepped into the courtyard. The reason why he hadn't greeted him immediately was because he needed to comprehend what he had comprehended earlier, but he also wanted to delay it for a while. He clearly knew that Zhao Ji had called this faction summit to target him. So why did he have to do whatever he wanted? Why couldn't he arrive at whatever time he wanted? Ninth junior brother, the faction summit is about to begin. Let's hurry up and set off. Although he wanted to ask Yu Haoran about the results of his comprehension, Chu Zhongyu, who was in a hurry to attend the faction summit, hurried him. No rush. Shaking his head, Yu Haoran walked out of the pavilion and slowly returned to his bedroom. After changing into a new set of blue robes, he leisurely returned to the courtyard. Ninth junior brother, the faction summit has already begun. Let me bring you to 100 Feet Peak. Chu Zhongyu, who had been keeping track of the time, hurriedly reminded Yu Haoran when he finally finished packing up. No need. Shaking his head again, Yu Haoran waved at the black rat on the stone table. After the black rat scurried onto his shoulder, Yu Haoran instructed Black Bear, "Black Bear, grow 3 meters taller." "Yes." He Xiong responded to the order. Then, from its height of 2 meters, it accurately became 5 meters tall. This, being able to control the growth of its height, so precisely meant that this black bear before him was definitely not an ordinary bear-type exotic beast that had just stepped into Tier 10, as he had initially thought. With a light leap, he jumped directly onto the black bear's broad back. In order to allow Yu Haoran to sit more comfortably, the black bear crawled down on all fours and brought Yu Haoran out of the Hidden Moon Pavilion. And the black bear's spiritual performance made Chu Zhongyu's heart feel like it wasn't a perilous situation. That was because only exotic beasts at Tier 7 and above, with fully mature intelligence, could sense their master's needs without any instructions. "Eldest senior brother, let's go." When the black bear reached the entrance of the courtyard, Yu Haoran realized that Chu Zhongyu hadn't followed him. Turning his head, he saw that Chu Zhongyu was still in a daze from the black bear's shocking performance, and called out to him. Oh, Chu Zhongyu, who had regained his senses, hurriedly nodded and followed closely behind the black bear, running towards 100 Chi Peak at a speed that wasn't too slow, but wasn't too fast either. At this moment, he wasn't persuading Yu Haoran to speed up, nor was he suggesting that he bring him along. Because from the various methods the black rat and black bear had displayed earlier, as well as Yu Haoran taking the initiative to bring them to 100 Chi Peak, it meant that there would likely be an intense conflict at this faction summit. Since there was a possibility of an intense conflict, and the main character of the conflict was ninth junior brother, what was the difference between going early and late? 100 Chi Peak, in front of the destroyed treasury. Among the 38 peaks of the 100 Chi Gate, except for the trial peak that didn't have a peak master, the remaining 37 peak masters, as well as the senior statesman peak's first elder, had all gathered in front of the destroyed treasury. However, at this moment, except for Gao Wanping, the peak master of the law enforcement peak, and the peak master of the beastmaster peak, who didn't have any desires, all the other peak masters looked gloomy. Feng Qingyun has gone too far. Half an hour had passed since the meeting started. Guo Dishu, the peak master of Diyun Peak, who had just broken through to the martial emperor realm and was in high spirits, couldn't help but rebuke. It's been half an hour since the faction summit. Doesn't he care too much about the faction's rules? He doesn't even put you, Sect Master Zhao, in his eyes. Peak Master was right. A mere faction that ranks last dares to ignore the faction's rules. According to the rules, half of their allocation of resources for the next 3 years should be deducted. Yang Yinfeng, the Peak Master of the Sun and Moon Peak, who is only slightly stronger than Qingyun Peak, agreed. Sect Master, Peak Master Yang is right. It seems like we need to teach Feng Qingyun a lesson. He's overestimating himself just because he's improved his strength in recent years. Zhao Haoqing, the Peak Master of the Senior Statesman Peak and the Senior Statesman Group's Grand Elder, suggested with a serious expression. Rest assured, Grand Elder, I'll let Feng Qingyun and Qingyun Peak get the punishment they deserve. Whether it was Guo Dishu, the Peak Master of Diyun Peak, or Yang Yinfeng, the Peak Master of the Sun and Moon Peak, Zhao Ji only needed to listen to their complaints and instigation. He didn't need to respond. However, Zhao Haoqing not only needed to respond to Zhao Haoqing's suggestion, but he also needed to stand up and respond respectfully. This was because Zhao Haoqing was not only the Peak Master of the Senior Statesman Peak, but also the previous Sect Master of the 100 Chi Gate. He was also the previous Clan Master of the Zhao Clan. The reason why Zhao Ji could become the Sect Master of the 100 Chi Gate was entirely because of Zhao Haoqing's support. Oh, I wonder what kind of punishment Sect Master Zhao intends to give Qingyun Peak. Just as Zhao Ji was responding to Zhao Haoqing's suggestion, a mocking voice suddenly came from the foot of the 100 Chi Peak. They're finally here. Hearing the voice that he had been waiting for, a strange smile appeared on Zhao Ji's face. As for the Peak Masters who had been waiting for a long time and were somewhat impatient, they all turned their heads to look and saw a black bear and a young man. However, what really attracted everyone's attention wasn't the black bear and the young man, but the young man wearing a blue robe with a faint smile on his face. Who are you? Of the 37 Peak Masters present, most of them had either seen the young man with their own eyes or used their divine sense to observe him. Chapter 387. I have not completely recovered from my low temperature and am still in a daze. If there are any mistakes, Yin apologizes. 100 Feet Peak, in front of the ruins of the treasury. Standing behind Guo Dishu, Yu Yunxian, who had already been designated as a successor disciple, wanted to step forward and remind his master that Yu Haoran was an existence that the Yun Peak could not afford to offend. However, under the furious gazes of Zhao Ji and Great Elder Zhao Haoqing, the cowardly Yu Yunxian could only obediently stand where he was. Kong Yunga, who was standing behind the new Hall Master of the Hall of Merit, looked at Yu Haoran in surprise. Ever since the Blue Moon Secret Realm trial ended and they had parted ways, she had wanted to go to Qingyun Peak to find Yu Haoran. However, due to the changes in her aptitude and appearance, she had unexpectedly gained the attention of the new Hall Master of the Hall of Merit. He had directly accepted her as his only successor disciple. Therefore, during this period of time, she had been cultivating diligently under the strict guidance of the new Hall Master. Now, not only had she consolidated the realm she had broken through in the secret realm, she had also broken through 2 small realms. Now, she was already at the peak of 3rd grade Martial Master. And this time, the new Hall Master had brought her to the faction summit to broaden her horizons. From this point alone, it could be seen that the new Hall Master of the Hall of Merit intended to let Kong Yung-ah take over the position of Hall Master of the Hall of Merit in the future. The Sword Without Trace, who was standing behind the Peak Master of the Beastmaster Peak, revealed an astonished expression when he saw Yu Haoran sitting on the back of the black bear. This was because he had not expected that Yu Haoran, who had just become a disciple of Qingyun Peak, would actually be able to represent Qingyun Peak at the faction summit. Could it be that the Peak Master of Qingyun Peak had already chosen Yu Haoran to take over the position of Peak Master in advance? Sitting on the back of the black bear, Yu Haoran coldly glanced at Guodishu and asked in disdain, "Who are you?" After hearing Yu Haoran's disdainful question, Guodishu was so angry that he laughed and said, "Kid, you have guts. I'm the Yin Peak's Peak Lord, Guodishu." "Who is Guodishu? I've never heard of him." Yu Haoran pretended to think for a moment, and then said with a blank expression, "Brat, since you don't know who I, Guodishu, am, then I'll let you know right now." Yu Haoran's dazed expression had completely infuriated the competitive Guodishu. Not only did he stand up, he even used his elemental energy transformation technique to form a giant palm. Then, he viciously grabbed at Yu Haoran. "Old man, you're courting death." Looking at the huge palm that was quickly approaching him, Yu Haoran, who was already prepared, roared. While activating the large Power King Kong Ape's blood essence in his body, he also used the first move of the 7 transformations of the Flood Dragon martial skill, transforming into a Flood Dragon that was about 50 meters long. Then, he used the Flood Dragon to temporarily slow down the speed of the huge palm. Although Guodishu had attacked in anger, Yu Haoran's cultivation was only at the mid-5th grade Martial Master. It was not worth it for Guodishu to use his full strength. Therefore, Guodishu only used less than 30% of his strength. He had just broken through to the Martial King realm and had not completely consolidated his realm. Therefore, Guodishu's giant palm, with 30% of his strength, was only around the 6th grade Martial King realm. Relying on the strength of a peak 9th grade Martial Master and the Flood Dragon that possessed the 9th level of divine power, its power was barely close to the Martial Ancestor realm. Although the Flood Dragon was definitely not a match for the giant palm, it was still barely able to resist the giant palm for nearly a second. And with the help of this less than a second, Yu Haoran had already completed nearly 70% of his transformation. And after transforming, his strength had also reached the peak of the 9th grade Martial King. Therefore, Yu Haoran used the secret transformation technique to continue increasing the strength of the large Power King Kong Ape. At the same time, he swung out a fist technique, heavily smashing towards the incoming giant palm. Boom! The fist technique of a peak 9th grade Martial King was immediately superior to the palm technique of a peak 6th grade Martial King. Accompanied by a loud sound, the giant palm that Guodishu had transformed into was directly shattered by the heavy fist. Following that, the fist technique that had consumed less than 30% of its power directly blasted towards Guodishu. Due to the limited space in front of the treasury ruins, every peak master seat was very close to each other. Therefore, the power of Yu Haoran's punch, other than Guodishu, also enveloped the other 9 peak masters at the same time. Unlucky. 7 seats away from Guodishu, the peak master of Cloud Listening Peak, Chao Yunwei, could not help but curse. Then he planned to stand up and disperse the incoming fist. Senior Chao, if you attack the fist technique, it is equivalent to provoking Yu Haoran. Now, take a look at Yu Haoran's strength after transforming. Li Meng, the peak master of Hung Peak, who had a good relationship with Chao Yunwei, hurriedly reminded him. Raising his head, Yu Haoran, who had completed his transformation, had already transformed into a giant ape that was about 57 meters tall. There was no need to distinguish the aura emitted from Yu Haoran's body. Just based on the height of his transformation, it was enough to see that his strength had already reached the peak of the 7th grade of the 5th step, which was the strength of a peak 7th grade martial king. As for Chao Yunwei, he was only at the peak of the 8th grade martial king. Not to mention fighting with Yu Haoran, it was a problem whether he could withstand the aura emitted by Yu Haoran after his transformation. Therefore, Chao Yunwei could only sit down again and watch how Guodishu counterattacked. The fist technique that had consumed 30% of its power was only around the 6th grade martial king. Facing Guodishu, whose strength had reached the martial king realm, it was no longer a threat. However, Yu Haoran, who had already completed his transformation, was not the kind of person who cared about the occasion or who the opponent was. Just as Guodishu dispersed the fist technique, Yu Haoran, who had transformed into a large power King Kong ape, directly leaped up from ground. Then, using the speed of descent due to his huge body, his 2 giant feet fiercely stomped towards Guodishu, as well as the dozen or so peak masters sitting around Guodishu. Damn, this is really a case of sitting in seclusion and disaster, descending from the sky. A peak master who was only at the peak of the 7th grade martial king felt the terrifying power contained in the giant foot that was quickly stomping towards him. He could only admit that he was unlucky and led the disciples behind him to dodge and advance. As for Guodishu, as the main character, when he felt the power of the peak of the 7th grade martial king in the giant foot that was quickly stomping towards him, his face was as pale as snow. This was because he had never imagined that an inner disciple whose cultivation was only at the middle of the 5th grade martial master realm would actually have such a powerful and abnormal method. At this moment, he couldn't help but recall that when he was in seclusion to break through to the martial king realm, he had accidentally felt several strange beast energy fluctuations in the sect. Now that he thought about it, the reason for those strange beast energy fluctuations was probably caused by the youth in front of him who could transform into a strange beast. However, it was too late for regrets now. The most important thing now was to find a way to block the opponent's attack and preserve his own life. However, he had just broken through to the martial king realm and had not completely consolidated his strength. He was simply no match for the strange beast that was descending from the sky. In the end, he could only choose to admit defeat and loudly beg for mercy. Enough. However, just as Guodishu was about to open his mouth to admit defeat, a thunderous rebuke directly rang out at the same time, interrupting Guodishu's thoughts of loudly begging for mercy. Chapter 388. 100 Feet Peak. In front of the ruins of the treasure vault. Zhaoji, it seems that the staff technique from a while ago still didn't teach you a good lesson. Until now, you still don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Yu Haoran, who had long known that Zhaoji would interfere, had already taken out the purple gold staff in advance when he leaped into the sky, guarding against his sneak attack. Although the purple gold staff was not a real magic weapon, when Thaling was refining the purple gold staff, he had considered the terrifying power that the sky-facing staff technique could form. So he had specially refined the purple gold staff in accordance with the hardness and strength of the purple gold staff, so that its hardness and strength were not inferior to that of a top-grade Saint Realm magic weapon. Therefore, Yu Haoran, who did not use the sky-facing staff technique, directly used the purple staff in his hand to disperse the sword light that contained traces of cold air and had the power of a 9th-grade martial emperor. It was also through this sword light that Yu Haoran truly confirmed that Zhaoji's cultivation had officially reached the peak of the 9th-grade martial emperor. Boom! The power King Kong ape, who had heavily smashed into the ground of the 100 feet peak, immediately caused the entire mountain to shake. Then Yu Haoran waved the purple staff in his hand and threatened with a booming voice. Zhaoji, do you believe that the sky-facing staff technique that I will use next will be aimed directly at the peak of the 100 feet peak? I believe it. Unexpectedly, in the face of Yu Haoran's threat, Zhao Ji not only nodded his head, but also revealed a happy smile on his face. Then he took out a translucent jade that looked like a button and flicked it into the air with his middle finger. You Howren, if you can't transform into a power King Kong ape, then what ability and means do you have to threaten me? As the button that was flicked into the air suddenly exploded, a layer of colorful energy shield suddenly appeared in the originally empty sky of the 100-feet peak. In the moment the energy barrier appeared, Yu Howren, who had transformed into a large Power King Kong ape, immediately felt the large Power King Kong ape essence blood in his body being forcefully suppressed. In the end, it condensed into a drop of essence blood floating in his body, causing him to gradually remove his beast transformation. Looking at Yu Howren, who had returned to his original state, Zhao Ji's face revealed an incomparably proud smile. Yu Howren, martial nephew Yu, I don't know if you still have the confidence to ignore everyone here and threaten me, the gate master of the 100 Qi Gate. Zhao Ji asked arrogantly. Zhao Ji, you're just a coward who only knows how to rely on a woman's help to show off in front of me. What right do you have to question me? Yu Howren, who had been forced to revert to his original appearance, put away the purple gold rod without the slightest bit of nervousness, and then mocked with a disdainful expression. Yu Howren, you're courting death. He actually said that he was a coward who only knew how to rely on a woman. Yu Howren's naked humiliation made Zhao Ji furious. At the same time, he fiercely slapped the armrest of the throne, and at the same time, he was about to directly attack. However, facing Zhao Ji, who was about to attack, Yu Howren was not the slightest bit nervous. Instead, he directly walked to the seat below the Vice Gate Master Lai Yin, who was ranked 7th out of the 37 branches of the 100 Qi Gate, and was also in front of Guodi Shu, whom he had almost killed just now. Get up. Coldly looking at Guodi Shu, Yu Howren reprimanded with a tone full of killing intent. Facing Yu Howren's reprimand, he, who had suppressed the fear in his heart with great difficulty, was so angry that he didn't know what to say. Although Yu Howren's transformation secret method had been restricted by Zhao Ji's Jade Stone and was temporarily unable to transform into an exotic beast, when he thought of the pair of giant feet that contained the power of a peak 7th-grade martial emperor, Guodi Gang finally chose to yield and leave the seat that originally belonged to the Yun Peak. And the moment he stood up and left, it officially represented that Qingyun Peak had officially advanced to the 7th place of the 37 branches of the 100 Qi Gate. Seeing Yu Howren completely ignoring him, Zhao Ji stood up abruptly, intending to directly kill Yu Howren. However, Great Elder Zhao Haoqing, who was sitting below him, coughed lightly with the power of his divine soul, and then used divine thought to send a message. Gate Master, don't forget the true purpose of this sex summit. After receiving the secret message from Great Elder Zhao Haoqing, Zhao Ji took a deep breath, finally suppressed the burning anger in his heart, and sat back down on the throne. However, at this moment, a lazy voice rang out, causing the anger that Zhao Ji had suppressed with great difficulty to almost erupt once again. Yu Howren, who was sitting on the throne that originally belonged to Guodi Shu, teased him with an unusually relaxed expression. Gate Master Zhao, we're all very busy. If you have something to say, please say it quickly. I still have to go back to Qingyun Peak to bay my black bear. Gate Master, Yu Howren is deliberately provoking you to make you lose your composure. Fortunately, Zhao Haoqing, who had a strong state of mind, was not affected at all. Moreover, he reminded Zhao Ji in a timely manner, causing Zhao Ji to finally suppress the burning anger in his chest. Glancing coldly at Yu Howren, Zhao Ji took a deep breath and asked in a calm voice, Gate Master, do you know where you are? Great Elder, Peak Masters of each branch, do you know where you are sitting now? The pile of ruins in front of them was placed motionlessly in front of them. Apart from a few disciples behind the Peak Masters who had never been to 100 Feet Peak before, all of the 35 Peak Masters present knew about it. Everyone knew about it, but no one dared to answer Zhao Ji's question. After all, The strength that Yu Haoran had just displayed was too terrifying, and they did not have a treasure that Zhao Ji could use to restrict Yu Haoran's transformation. If they spoke too much and offended Yu Haoran, wouldn't they be asking for trouble if Yu Haoran came looking for trouble with them afterwards? Therefore, everyone could only choose to remain silent. Sect leader Zhao, in order to avoid the awkwardness of having no one to answer your question, let me answer this question. The scene was silent for nearly a minute. Seeing that no one was speaking, Yu Haoran kindly took over the topic and said, "Let's go. This is the place where 100 Feet Peak performs monkey shows for their guests, but we haven't seen anyone performing monkey shows until now. Could it be that sect head Zhao is treating us as monkeys, while he himself is the one performing monkey shows?" But what kind of person was Yu Haoran? He was a narrow-minded and vile person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. How could he possibly smooth things over for Zhao Ji? Zhao Ji treated them like monkeys, while Zhao Ji was the one playing the monkey. Although everyone present knew that Yu Haoran was misinterpreting Zhao Ji's meaning, they still felt a little uncomfortable in their hearts. "Yu Haoran, shut up." Seeing that Yu Haoran was willing to distort his meaning and instigate everyone's dissatisfaction with him, Zhao Ji, who was completely blinded by anger, had already forgotten Zhao Haoqing's advice and roared at Yu Haoran with murderous intent. "Zhao Ji, isn't your real intention of holding this faction summit to use the pressure of the Peak Masters to force me, Yu Haoran, or in other words, to force my master to agree to the faction life and death duel between Clear Cloud Peak and 100 Feet Peak?" In the face of Zhao Ji's murderous actions, Yu Haoran also stood up and retorted in a tough tone, not to be outdone. Apart from Gao Wanping and the two vice sect leaders who had already guessed Zhao Ji's thoughts, the rest of the Peak Masters looked at Zhao Ji in shock when they heard Yu Haoran mention the faction's life and death battle. Chapter 389. 100 Feet Peak. In front of the ruins of the treasure vault, Qingyun Peak, which pursued peace in the world, rarely had conflicts with other factions in the sect. How did they provoke sect leader Zhao Ji to the point that he had to use a faction deathmatch to resolve a conflict that wasn't serious at all? Could it be because of Yu Haoran's repeated disrespect and the destruction of 100 Feet Peak's treasure vault in the heat of youth? At this point, all the Peak Masters present looked at Zhao Ji with eyes full of doubt and dissatisfaction, as well as a trace of anger. Just because of the provocation and disrespect of a disciple of his sect several times, he decided to kill everyone in the opponent's faction as a means of revenge. Then, would these factions that had accumulated grievances with Zhao Ji for a long time follow in Qingyun Peak's footsteps in the future and be wiped out one by Zhao Ji using the faction deathmatch? Sensing the dissatisfaction and doubt in everyone's eyes, Zhao Ji went completely crazy. This was because he had never expected that Yu Haoran would suddenly take control of the situation that he had carefully planned. Moreover, under Yu Haoran's relentless provocation, he was in an absolute disadvantage. "I can't accept this." At this moment, Zhao Ji only had one thought in his mind, and that was to destroy Yu Haoran. Only then could he regain control of the situation and fulfill the request he had once made to Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion, or rather, the promise he had made. "Zhao Ji, sit down." Seeing that Zhao Ji was completely enraged by Yu Haoran and had lost his composure, Great Elder Zhao Haoqing couldn't help but scold him. Then, he directly stood up and walked in front of Zhao Ji, then looked coldly at Yu Haoran. "Yu Haoran, don't go too far." "Oh, could it be that I guessed wrong? The faction that wants to have a faction deathmatch with Qingyun Peak is not 100 Feet Peak, but your senior statesman Peak." Seeing that Zhao Haoqing had taken the initiative to threaten him, Yu Haoran provoked him without the slightest fear. "It doesn't matter. Although our Qingyun faction isn't strong, each and every one of us is a man of indomitable spirit. Each and every one of us is a hero who doesn't fear death. For the prosperity of 100 Chi Gate, we are willing to sacrifice our blood and passion." Enough! Seeing that Yu Haoran's passionate speech had resonated with the Peak leaders, Zhao Haoqing knew that he had to be decisive today. Otherwise, the situation would be completely out of their control. Therefore, after berating Yu Haoran to keep his mouth shut, Zhao Haoqing vaguely pointed out that the hatred between Ming Yun Peak and 100 Feet Peak had long since accumulated, and that it could only be resolved through a life-or-death battle between the two factions. Great Elder, as the saying goes, an old man who does not die is a thief. Yu Haoran mocked Zhao Haoqing as he vaguely explained how the two peaks became enemies and emphasized the importance of the faction life-and-death battle to resolve the hatred between the two factions. Great Elder, I'm sure all the peak masters present are well aware of the situation at the 100 Chi Gate. Make use of the faction deathmatch to eliminate the weakest Clear Cloud Peak. Then, with the might of the faction extermination faction, you can directly suppress the peak masters of all the factions present. Then, you can complete the faction master unification that you and Zhao Ji have been longing for. I'm afraid this is the real reason why you called for the faction summit. After hearing Yu Haoran directly point out Zhao Haoqing and Zhao Ji's true purpose, the two vice-faction masters, Lai Yin and Zhong Fakin, the newly appointed Hall Master of the Hall of Merit, Guodi Shu of the Yun Peak, and several other powerful peak masters of the other factions, all had a sudden change in expression. I opposed the faction life-and-death battle between Clear Cloud Peak and 100 Feet Peak. After accumulating strength for many years, Lai Yin believed that he already had the strength to challenge Zhao Ji, or rather challenge 100 Feet Peak. He was the one who least wanted to see the situation that Yu Haoran had just described. Therefore, Lai Yin was the first person to stand out and oppose. I also opposed the faction life-and-death battle between Clear Cloud Peak and 100 Feet Peak. The second person to stand out and oppose was Zhong Fakin, who was also ambitious and had the qualifications to reach the top. I also opposed the faction life-and-death battle between Clear Cloud Peak and 100 Feet Peak. The third person to stand out and oppose was the newly appointed Hall Master of the Hall of Merit, who was preparing to show his skills. Subsequently, more than a dozen peak masters from other factions stood out to oppose. According to the rules of the 100 Feet Gate, in order for the life-and-death battle between two factions to succeed, 3 conditions had to be met. The first condition was that both parties participating in the life-and-death battle had to agree. The second condition was that at least 2/3 of the factions had to agree. The third condition was that the agreement of the 9 elders had to be obtained. As for the third condition of the life-and-death battle, Great Elder Zhao Haoqing had already successfully convinced the 8 elders when he left Elder Peak. They had already agreed to the life-and-death battle between Clear Cloud Peak and 100 Feet Peak. As for the first condition, Zhao Ji was also confident that he could force Yu Haoran to agree. Only the second condition was that at least 2/3 of the peak masters of the factions had to agree. Originally, Zhao Haoqing and Zhao Ji wanted to use pressure step by step and promise all kinds of tempting conditions to trick the peak masters of the sects and factions into agreeing. Then, after taking care of all the people in the Qingyan faction, they would use the prestige of the extermination faction to force all the peak masters present to hand over their authority. However, they had not expected Yu Haoran to be so astute. Not only had he guessed the real purpose of the faction summit in advance, but he had also directly exposed it in front of everyone. This had instantly put them in a passive position. However, the cunning Zhao Haoqing knew that he and Zhao Ji could not admit to what Yu Haoran had just said. Otherwise, not only would the life-and-death battle with Clear Cloud Peak not be able to proceed smoothly, but he and Sect Master Zhao Ji might even be criticized by everyone, which would then lead to a faction war prematurely. Therefore, Zhao Haoqing pretended to be wronged, and his tone was full of anger as he defended himself. Yu Haoran, don't try to bewitch us. Sect Master, and I definitely don't mean that. The life-and-death battle with Clear Cloud Peak is completely to resolve the hatred between us. If we... Old man, what are you thinking? I don't need to point it out directly, and you don't need to try your best to explain. Yu Haoran directly interrupted Zhao Haoqing's explanation and said with contempt, "You deliberately held the faction summit because you wanted to use the pressure of the peak masters present to force me, Yu Haoran, or force my master to agree to the life-and-death battle with your 100 Feet Peak, right?" I agree. Ninth junior brother. Chu Zhongyu shouted with a pale face. Originally, Chu Zhongyu had been very worried when he and Yu Haoran were targeted by the Peak Master of Diyun Peak when they had just arrived at the treasure house ruins of 100 Feet Peak. When Yu Haoran pointed out the real purpose of Zhao Haoqing and Zhao Ji holding the faction summit, Chu Zhongyu was scared out of his wits. Yu Haoran finally used the advantage of words to break Zhao Haoqing and Zhao Ji's careful trap. The opposition of the peak masters of the various factions to the life and death battle between Clear Cloud Peak and 100 Feet Peak made Chu Zhongyu heave a sigh of relief. Yu Haoran suddenly agreed to the life and death battle on behalf of the sect. While he was scared out of his wits, Chu Zhongyu could not help but remind him. Eldest senior brother, do you believe me? Yu Haoran turned his head to look at Chu Zhongyu and asked, I believe you. Looking at Yu Haoran's sincere eyes, Chu Zhongyu nodded. But when he thought of the vast difference in strength between Clear Cloud Peak and 100 Feet Peak, he still could not help but want to persuade Yu Haoran to give up on his personal feelings. However, when he thought of Yu Haoran's stubborn temper, he could only use his master, Feng Qingyun, as an excuse. Chapter 390. 100 Feet Peak. In front of the ruins of the treasury. Eldest senior brother, Master is at the critical juncture of breaking through. We don't need to trouble him with a small matter like the faction deathmatch. Shaking his head, Yu Haoran directly rejected Chu Zhongyu's idea of using Master to prevent him from agreeing to the faction deathmatch. But Chu Zhongyu still did not give up and wanted to persuade him. However, Yu Haoran waved his hand and pleaded sincerely. Eldest senior brother, please believe me. Believe me, Yu Haoran will never joke about the lives of my fellow disciples. Moreover, I promise you that after the faction deathmatch is over, I will give you a heaven-defying opportunity that you have never thought of in your life. At this point, Yu Haoran raised his head and looked at Gao Wanping, the peak master of the Enforcer Peak, with a pleading look in his eyes. Gao Wanping nodded slightly and agreed to Yu Haoran's promise to Chu Zhongyu. Sigh. Looking at the pleading in Yu Haoran's eyes and the sincerity in his tone, Chu Zhongyu could only sigh and walk to Yu Haoran's side. Ninth junior brother, you once said that the true reason why our Qingyun faction was able to rise was not because of how many cultivation resources we had, nor because of how many geniuses we had, but because of the unity of the 12 of us. Chu Zhongyu stretched out his hand and patted Yu Haoran's shoulder, putting down his worries. Since you want to settle the grudge with 100 Feet Peak through the faction deathmatch, then of course I will fight side by side with you. Seeing that Chu Zhongyu had finally overcome his worries and was brave enough to face any predicament, Yu Ran smiled with relief. At the same time, he was even more certain of his thoughts. Eldest senior brother, a mere 100 Feet Peak doesn't need you, the head disciple of Qingyun Peak, to deal with it. Next, you only need to be a spectator and watch how I, the junior brother, start a massacre, Yu Haoran said domineeringly, indicating that Chu Zhongyu didn't need to interfere in the upcoming battle. Martial nephew Yu, if Zhao Ji and the others want to eliminate the Qingyun Peak through the faction life and death battle, they will need the approval of 2/3 of the Peak Masters present. Just as Yu Haoran finally managed to persuade Chu Zhongyu to agree to the factional deathmatch and was about to ruthlessly humiliate Zhao Haoqing and Zhao Ji, Lai Yin, who had been the first to jump out to oppose, spoke up in a considerate tone. At the very least, as the Peak Lord of Rising Dragon Peak, I do not agree to 100 Feet Peak and Clear Cloud Peak having a factional life and death battle. Martial Nisyu, I also don't agree with you guys having a death match. Vice Sect Master Zhong Fakin added. Martial nephew Yu, I agree with the 2 Vice Sect leaders. I also don't support the faction life and death battle. The new Hall Master of the Achievement Hall also hurriedly expressed his stance. I don't agree either. I object. With Lai Yin taking the lead, including Vice Sect Master Zhong Fakin and the Hall Master of the Achievement Hall, there were a total of 29 Peak Masters who opposed the faction deathmatch. Gao Wanping, the Peak Master of Law Enforcement Peak, who had not expressed his stance, had secretly formed an alliance with Yu Haoran, hoping to kill Zhao Ji through the faction life and death battle. Thus, only 3 peak masters proactively supported the faction life and death battle between the 2 peaks. From this point alone, one could see how bad Zhao Ji's prestige in the 100 Chi Gate was. One could also understand why he was anxious to use the faction life and death battle to deter the other factions. Because according to the current situation, his position as the sect master was likely to become more and more unstable. Sect Master Zhao, it's not that you Howren, don't want to follow your wishes, but there are so many peak masters who oppose the faction life and death battle. What do you think we should do? Shrugging, Yu Howren waved his hands and said with a helpless expression. After a period of adjustment, Zhao Ji had completely suppressed the anger in his heart and was able to calmly face Yu Howren. Coldly looking at the peak masters who were jumping up and down and desperately opposing the faction life and death battle, Zhao Ji could not help but snort coldly. Then, a powerful aura that could change the color of the sky quickly rose from his body and began to envelop everyone present. Black Bear, come here. With Thaling's divine thought restored to the martial honor realm, no matter how powerful Zhao Ji's aura was, it could not affect him. However, considering that there were too many people present, he did not want to expose Thaling's existence. Furthermore, Thaling had more important things to do, so he could not be disturbed. Therefore, he could only temporarily signal Black Bear to come to his side. Then, seeing that the Peak Master of Beastmaster Peak, who was only a 5th grade martial king, was unable to resist Zhao Ji's oppressive aura with his own cultivation, he was unable to take care of the sword without trace behind him. Thus, he beckoned to the sword without trace. Senior Brother Wuhan, come here quickly. The sword without trace, who had been suppressed by Zhao Ji's aura to the point where he could not straighten his body, heard Yu Howren's call and glanced at the sweating Peak Master. Finally, he gritted his teeth and walked step by step towards Yu Howren. Originally, Zhao Ji's aura was mainly directed at the 34 Peak Masters. He did not care about the legacy disciples they had brought with them. This was also the main reason why the legacy disciples, who were only at the martial master realm, could grit their teeth and persevere. However, seeing that the sword without trace was actually planning to approach Yu Howren and use Yu Howren's protection to counteract the oppressive aura, Zhao Ji immediately snorted in displeasure. Then, he withdrew a portion of his aura and directly pressed down on the sword without trace. Black Bear, Zhao Ji's snort made Yu Howren feel that something was wrong. He hurriedly called out to Black Bear and asked it to take him and Chu Zhongyu to approach the sword without trace. Fortunately, Yu Howren's reaction was relatively fast, and the distance between the two was not far. Just as Zhao Ji deliberately withdrew his aura and pressed down on the sword without trace, Black Bear's protective aura directly enveloped the sword without trace's body, preventing him from being seriously injured by the aura. Peak of the 9th grade martial royal realm. Although Zhao Ji's aura was very strong, it was not much of a threat to Gao Wanping, who had just broken through to the early 5th grade martial royal realm. Gao Wanping directly stood up from his chair and looked directly at Zhao Ji, gnashing his teeth as he spoke. Lai Yin, who had reached the peak of the 3rd grade martial royal realm and the 4th grade martial royal realm, also stood up and looked at Zhao Ji with a serious expression. Now, I wonder who still wants to oppose the factional life and death duel between 100 Feet Peak and Qingyun Peak. Zhao Ji asked the Peak Masters who had been suppressed by the aura, except for Yu Howren, who was not affected by the aura because of Black Bear's protection. After waiting for about a minute, Zhao Ji nodded in satisfaction and then replied to Zhao Haoqing. First Elder, it seems that the Peak Masters of the 34 branches of 100 Chi Gate have all agreed to the life and death duel between 100 Feet Peak and Qingyun Peak. Zhao Ji pointed at Yu Howren and said with a ferocious expression, as a representative of Qingyun Peak, Yu Howren also agrees to the life and death duel. Therefore, as the Peak Master of 100 Feet Peak, I beg the First Elder to officially open the battlefield of the life and death duel. Use the life and death duel to resolve the enmity between our two peaks that can never be resolved. Alas, Zhao Haoqing looked at the 34 peak masters who were completely suppressed and then looked at the relaxed Yu Haoran. He sighed and said in a tone full of pity, "Why bother? First Elder, please open the battlefield of the life and death duel." Zhao Ji knew that Zhao Haoqing's pity was just for show, so he continued to plead. Chapter 391. 100 Feet Peak in front of the ruins of the treasury. As Zhao Haoqing nodded in agreement, the pressure on everyone was instantly withdrawn. At the same time, many peak masters who had not reached the martial emperor realm fell to the ground due to the lack of strength. Yu Haoran, gather the rest of Qingyun Peak. Zhao Haoqing instructed Yu Haoran after Zhao Ji withdrew his aura. It's just 100 feet peak. There's no need for my senior brothers to do anything. Yu Haoran sneered disdainfully. Yu Haoran, if you don't gather the other disciples of Qingyun Peak now, after sect leader Zhao kills you and Chu Zhongyu, he will lead the experts of 100 Feet Peak to attack Qingyun Peak and slaughter everyone there. Seeing the unusually arrogant Yu Haoran, Zhao Haoqing was annoyed and couldn't help but threaten him with the lives of all the people of Qingyun Peak. Old man, don't spout nonsense. If I, Yu Haoran, am no match for Zhao Ji, what's the use of my senior brothers who are only in the martial ancestor realm? They'll be slaughtered by you all the same. Yu Haoran, who was also annoyed by Zhao Haoqing's pretentious, disgusting look, retorted mockingly. In that case, the sect deathmatch between 100 Feet Peak and Qingyun Peak will begin immediately. Seeing that Yu Haoran was still ridiculing him, Zhao Haoqing didn't want to waste any more time and directly announced the start of the sect deathmatch. Wait a minute, Yu Haoran asked with a frown after loudly stopping Zhao Haoqing's order. Old man, according to the rules of 100 Feet Gate, shouldn't the sect deathmatch find an empty mountain and then start the fight between the two peaks? That's right. Zhao Haoqing nodded in response to Yu Haoran's question. But then his tone changed and he said with a sinister smile, "However, considering that Qingyun Peak is weak and has too few disciples, there's no need for a big venue. Therefore, the empty space in front of the 100 Feet Peak treasure vault will be the battlefield of your factional deathmatch. You win." The only reason he didn't change the battlefield was because he wanted to rely on the jade magic tool that Zhao Ji had just used to restrict him from transforming into a strange beast, and then use the sky-facing staff technique. But Zhao Haoqing and Zhao Ji thought that they could do nothing to him. Senior brother Wu Hen returned to Beastmaster Peak first. Yu Haoran instructed the sword without trace. Junior brother Yu, I am now at the peak of first grade martial great master. I can help you. In response to Yu Haoran's orders, the sword without trace did not turn around and leave. Instead, he intended to participate in the faction deathmatch. However, before he could finish his suggestion, Yu Haoran interrupted him. Senior brother Wu Hen, thank you for your kind intentions, but this is a battle of life and death between Qingyun Peak and 100 Feet Peak. If you participate, you will definitely implicate Beastmaster Peak. I'm afraid that's something that neither you nor I want to see. Sigh. Jin Wuhan turned his head and glanced at the Peak Master of Beast Taming Peak's white hair. Thinking of how the Peak Master of Beast Taming Peak usually took care of him, Jin Wuhan could only sigh and turn around to leave. After the sword without trace left, Yu Haoran turned to Chu Zhongyu and instructed, eldest senior brother, go to the Peak Master of Law Enforcement Peak. Ninth junior brother, shouldn't we fight side by side? The sword without trace was asked to leave because he was not a disciple of Qingyun Peak and could not participate in the faction deathmatch. However, he was the eldest senior brother of Qingyun Peak. If he were to leave now, he would be facing the entire 100 Feet Peak alone. How could he agree to that? However, before he could finish his words, Yu Haoran interrupted him. Eldest senior brother, you're too weak. If you stay here, you'll affect my performance. Compared to his amiable attitude towards the sword without trace, Yu Haoran was not so polite to Chu Zhongyu. Facing Yu Haoran's contempt, Chu Zhongyu did not know whether to be angry or gratified. Nephew Chu, the junior brother is right. If you stay here, you won't be of any help. Instead, You'll be a burden to Yu Haoran. Gao Wanping, the peak master of law enforcement peak, suddenly reminded him. Ninth junior brother, if I see you in danger, I'll definitely help. Seeing Yu Haoran's resolute attitude and hearing the facts pointed out by Gao Wanping, Chu Zhongyu finally nodded and agreed to leave temporarily. However, before leaving, he also expressed his attitude. Okay, Yu Haoran nodded and agreed. Fouling, how much longer do you need? While Chu Zhongyu was walking towards Gao Wanping, Yu Haoran asked. 3 minutes. Give me 3 more minutes, and I'll be able to break this damned magic weapon. Fouling's unusually angry reply came from the sea of consciousness. Fouling, not to mention 3 minutes, even if it's 30 minutes, Zhao Ji can't do anything to me, so you don't have to worry. Hearing the urgency and anger in Fouling's tone, Yu Haoran knew that he was worried about his own safety and resented Zhao Ji and the others for pressuring him step by step. Yu Haoran, it's not a matter of time, but I want to see you transform into a large power King Kong ape now, and then ruthlessly slaughter everyone on 100 Feet Peak for me. Hearing Yu Haoran's advice, Fouling still said angrily, Okay, I promise you'll see it. After giving Fouling a guarantee, Yu Haoran raised his head and looked at Zhao Ji, his tone full of ridicule as he asked, Sect leader Zhao, since it's a faction life and death battle, then we need to send out all the people from our respective factions. Because my Qingyan Peak has too few people and is too weak, I don't need to come out and embarrass myself. I don't know why the prosperous 100 Feet Peak only has sect leader Zhao. Don't tell me you need someone else to destroy you. Zhao Ji said proudly as he looked at Yu Haoran with the same disdain. All right, it seems that the battle between us can basically represent the final outcome of the faction life and death battle. This time, Yu Haoran did not mock or tease Zhao Ji. Instead, he said with a serious expression, If that's the case, then there's no need for us to talk nonsense. Let's do it. Yu Haoran, are you ready to die? Although he wished that he could slap Yu Haoran to death right now, when he thought about how he had suffered losses in front of him and how many times he had been humiliated, Zhao Ji did not want him to die so easily. He wanted to torture him to his heart's content in order to vent the anger and depression that had been accumulating in his heart for a long time. I'll return the same sentence to you. After retorting to Zhao Ji, Yu Haoran turned around and patted Black Bear as he instructed. Black Bear, smash him into a meat patty for me. Hello. After hearing Yu Haoran's instructions, Black Bear excitedly patted its chest and howled. Chapter 392. 100 Feet Peak, in front of the ruins of the treasury. A 5th rank, 8th rank, Peak Emperor Realm Beast, Guo Dishu, the Peak Master of the Yun Peak, shouted in horror when he saw the 58-meter-tall black bear that was as tall as a mountain. The Peak Lord of Beastmaster Peak was overjoyed as he murmured, A 5th rank, 8th rank Emperor Realm Beast, and a bear-type beast that excels in strength. I'm afraid this black bear's strength is no weaker than a 9th rank Martial Emperor. Good boy, I wasn't wrong. Gao Wanping praised happily when he saw the 58-meter-tall black bear, whose aura was no weaker than Zhao Ji's. This black bear is actually a 5th rank, 8th rank Emperor Realm Beast. Chu Zhongyu was shocked when he saw the 58-meter-tall black bear and thought of how he'd ignored it a few days ago. He also began to blame himself for his short-sightedness and ignorance. Zhao Ji, this black bear is still my Qingyun Peak's guardian beast. It can be considered a member of our Qingyun Peak. He wanted to reach out and pat the black bear to indicate its ownership, but the 58-meter-tall black bear's 2 giant paws were almost 2 meters tall. Yu Haoran could only clap his hands awkwardly when he saw the black bear's giant paws that emitted a strange smell. According to the sect's rules, guardian beasts can also participate in the sect's deathmatch. The smug Zhao Ji's face immediately darkened when he saw the ordinary black bear turn into an Emperor Realm exotic beast that wasn't any weaker than him. When he heard that the black bear was actually Qingyun Peak's guardian beast, his face was so gloomy that water could be squeezed out of it. After carefully comparing the aura emitted by the black bear, Zhao Ji knew that his strength was on par with the black bear in front of him. Neither of them would be able to defeat the other in a short time. There was also a very strict time limit for the artifact that restricted the transformation technique. If the battle between him and the black bear dragged on for too long, the artifact would lose its effect. Not only would his plan fail, but his life, 100 Feet Peak's existence, and the entire Zhao clan behind it would also suffer a devastating blow. Therefore, Zhao Ji couldn't care less about the solemn vow he'd made earlier and immediately activated the second plan, which was to dispatch the experts of 100 Feet Peak to surround and kill Yu Haoran. Zhao Ying, Zhao Haicheng, Zhao Siyu. Following Zhao Ji's loud shout, 2 men and 1 woman, 3 Peak 9th grade Martial King experts, quickly appeared beside Zhao Ji. I'll deal with this black bear. You guys kill Yu Haoran as soon as possible, Zhao Ji instructed as he pointed at the black bear in front of him. Understood. Zhao Ying and the other 2 immediately responded. 2 minutes left. Seeing the 3 Peak 9th grade Martial King experts rushing towards him, Yu Haoran muttered to himself. Then, he took out a medicinal pellet from his storage ring and quickly swallowed it. Flood Dragon goes to sea. When the pill began to take effect, Yu Haoran immediately used the first move of the 7 Flood Dragon transformations. Following the Dragon Roar, Zhao Ying and the others, who were rushing over, stopped at the same time. Then, with grave expressions, they looked at Yu Haoran's head. A Flood Dragon, which was close to 50 meters long, was slowly condensing. It was exactly the same as the legendary Flood Dragon. Yu Haoran, what kind of technique is this? Fouling didn't need to use all of his divine sense to break the artifact that restricted the transformation technique. Therefore, he reserved a portion of his divine sense in advance. He was worried that if Yu Haoran was in danger, he would be able to use his divine sense to save him. It was also this portion of his divine sense that had been paying attention to Yu Haoran. He discovered that the Flood Dragon that Yu Haoran had transformed using the power of the pill was also at the peak of 9th grade Martial King. A 7th grade, 9th grade beast solidifying pill, Yu Haoran calmly replied. A beast solidifying pill that can increase the strength of the creatures formed by Yuan Li. Fouling couldn't help but exclaim when he heard Yu Haoran mention the beast solidifying pill. That's right, Yu Haoran confirmed with a nod. That's not right, Fouling said with some confusion after receiving Yu Haoran's confirmation. Ever since the Pill Emperor of the ancient times went missing, the pill formula for the beast solidifying pill has long been lost. How did you? At this point, Fouling suddenly remembered that Yu Haoran loved adventure the most in his previous life. He had explored many ruins and ancient battlefields and knew many secrets that even he didn't know. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that he was able to find the Pill Emperor's training grounds or the cave left behind by the Pill Emperor of the ancient times. Therefore, he didn't continue to ask. Instead, he sped up the process of breaking the artifact that restricted the transformation technique. The Flood Dragon, which had completely unfolded its body, roared at Zhao Ying and the other 2. Then, it bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it charged towards them. Yu Haoran, the Flood Dragon whose strength has reached the peak of the 6th grade 9th grade, is no match for Zhao Ying and the other 2. Gao Wanping, who was also shocked by Yu Haoran's endless methods, muttered to himself. I wonder what kind of trump card you have to deal with 3 Peak 9th grade Martial King experts at the same time after the Flood Dragon is destroyed. 2 more minutes. Although the beast solidifying pill could allow the Flood Dragon's strength to reach the peak of the 6th grade 9th grade, the Flood Dragon was still a dead creature without its own consciousness. When it was at a disadvantage, it couldn't effectively change its attack method. Moreover, because its body was too large, it was difficult for it to dodge the attacks of Zhao Ying and the other 2. In the end, the Flood Dragon whose strength had reached the peak of the 6th grade 9th grade only gave Yu Haoran a minute of time. Looking at the Flood Dragon that was about to be destroyed, Yu Haoran muttered to himself. Then, he took out a green pill that emitted traces of wind attribute aura. After seeing the green pill that Yu Haoran took out, Fouling exclaimed once again, Swift Wind Pill. It's a pill that the pill emperor refined in the recent ancient times. It can increase one's speed by 10 times. That's right. This is also a 7th grade, 9th grade pill. It can allow me to have a speed that is not inferior to a peak 9th grade martial king for the next minute. Yu Howard nodded and swallowed the elixir. As he used the elixir to improve his body movement martial skill, he instructed the tower spirit. Thowling, this is the last trump card that I prepared beforehand. If you can't break the artifact that restricts the transformation technique within a minute, then I can only take the risk and use the slaughter spirit pill to kill everyone here. Don't worry, it won't take a minute. After hearing Yu Howard's warning, or rather, threat, Thowling directly merged the separated divine sense into the artifact to increase the speed of breaking the artifact. Seeing Yu Howard erupt with a speed that was not inferior to a peak 9th grade martial king, not only were Zhao Ying and the other two stunned, even the peak masters who were watching the battle felt that it was inconceivable. However, there was only one person who had a puzzled expression on his face. Yu Howard, with only the speed of a peak 9th grade martial king. How long can you dodge for? When the time comes, what will you do when the effect of the pill that increases your speed is exhausted? Gao Wanping softly muttered to himself. Split up and block him. Seeing Yu Howard use the speed of a peak 9th grade martial king to start running around the entire 100 feet peak, Zhaoying observed for a moment and then ordered. Yes. The other two peak 9th grade martial king experts also used their movement techniques and started to surround Yu Howard from the left and right. In his previous life, Yu Howard couldn't remember how many times he had been chased, so he had a lot of experience in how to avoid being surrounded by opponents. Chapter 393. 100 Feet Peak. How did Yu Howard escape from the encirclement of those three people? Seeing Yu Howard evade the encirclement that Zhao Ying and the other two had meticulously prepared in an incomprehensible manner, a peak master who specialized in speed asked with a puzzled expression. However, no one on the scene answered him. This was because these people also found it difficult to understand the strange contortions that Yu Howard's body showed when he was evading the encirclement. After narrowly avoiding the encirclement, Yu Howard quickly increased his speed and rushed directly into the residential area of 100 Feet Peak's inner sect disciples. Although evading the encirclement of Zhao Ying and the other two seemed brilliant, Yu Howard was very clear in his heart that it was only because they didn't understand him. They also didn't know the timing and methods he used to evade. These were all experiences that he gained from risking his life hundreds of times. However, this method could only be used once. Next time, Zhao Ying and the others could use their origin energy to seal off all his escape routes. Therefore, if he wanted to stall for time until Thowling removed the restriction on the artifact, he had to prevent Zhao Ying and the others from using their origin energy, nor dare to use their origin energy. The residential area of the inner sect disciples was the best place to restrict Zhao Ying and the others from using their origin energy. Whether it was 100 Feet Peak or the peaks of other factions, the majority of the disciples were not odd job disciples of the martial disciple realm, nor were they outer sect disciples of the martial warrior realm, nor were they powerful elite disciples of the martial ancestor realm. Instead, they were inner sect disciples of the martial master realm. As a faction of the sect, 100 Feet Peak had close to 10,000 inner sect disciples. This caused the residential area of the inner sect disciples to be very crowded. Seeing Yu Howard directly rush into the residential area of the inner sect disciples, Zhao Ying's expression changed. Then she loudly shouted, "All disciples disperse immediately." After hearing Vice Peak Master Zhao Ying's orders, the nearly 10,000 inner sect disciples of Bai Qi Peak hurriedly scattered in all directions. However, Yu Howard purposely used the extreme speed of a peak 9th grade martial king to charge into the crowd. All disciples disperse separately. Seeing Yu Howard treacherously rushing into the crowd, Zhaoying almost exploded in anger. She quickly continued to order with a stern expression. Yu Howard's expression couldn't help but change when he saw the dozens of disciples that had gathered together and quickly spread out. Then, he hurriedly went to look for the other people that had gathered together. Perhaps it was due to Zhao Ying's high prestige in the peak, but under her command, nearly 10,000 disciples instantly dispersed. This made Yu Haoran immediately lose the opportunity to hide. However, this was not a problem for Yu Haoran, because when he charged into the crowd of inner court disciples, he had already observed the situation of these disciples and had long since selected a few with outstanding temperaments, and were obviously the few genius disciples that 100 Feet Peak had focused on nurturing. Using the speed of a peak 9th grade martial king, Yu Haoran quickly appeared beside a genius disciple whose cultivation was at the peak of 3rd grade martial master, but whose body emitted an aura that vaguely reached the peak of 5th grade martial master. Before he could react, Yu Haoran directly knocked him out with a palm strike, and then used him as a shield to block Zhao Ying's attack. Originally, when they saw the disciples quickly disperse, Yu Haoran instantly lost the opportunity to hide. Zhao Ying and the other 2 peak 9th grade martial king experts had already gathered their spirit power, planning to use their spirit power to seal off all escape routes and directly kill Yu Haoran. However, when they saw Yu Haoran directly capture the most talented genius disciple of 100 Feet Peak, their expressions slightly changed. "Vice Peak Master, what do we do?" one of the experts anxiously asked. "In the faction life and death battle, if you don't die, then I die. We can't disregard the survival of the entire faction for the safety of one disciple." After only 5 seconds of consideration, Zhao Ying had already made the decision to abandon that genius disciple. This was enough to show Zhao Ying's fierce and ruthless ambition. Although it was a pity to abandon that genius disciple, just as Zhao Ying had said, the faction life and death battle concerned the survival of the entire faction. If they were delayed by Yu Haoran until the magic tool lost its effect, then the ones to suffer in the end would definitely be the upper echelons of the faction. Therefore, the other 2 peak 9th grade martial king experts directly used the martial skills they had prepared to strangle Yu Haoran. Sigh. Seeing that his plan had failed, Yu Haoran couldn't help but sigh. Then, he directly threw the genius disciple he had just captured to the side. He planned to overdraft half of his potential and temporarily raise his cultivation to the realm of martial king. Relying on his cultivation experience as a peak 9th grade martial king in his previous life, as well as his mental cultivation that was about to break through to the realm of martial sage, forcefully raising his cultivation to the realm of martial king would cause great harm to his potential and foundation. It was very likely that it would cause his cultivation to progress slowly for a long time in the future. However, compared to his own life, the result of his cultivation progressing slowly for a long time was still barely acceptable. Of course, if he didn't overdraft his own potential and used the slaughter spirit pill that threatened Thaling just now, it wasn't impossible to solve the current predicament. However, facing nearly 10,000 young people who would have a good future in front of him, and a few of them were people he was familiar with, he couldn't bear to use the inhumane slaughter spirit pill in the end. "Yu Haoran, it's done." Just as Yu Haoran was about to overdraft half of his potential and forcefully raise his cultivation, a beautiful voice like the sound of nature sounded in his mind. Hearing that Thaling had broken the magic tool that restricted the secret transformation technique in time, Yu Haoran couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Then, as he stimulated the blood essence of the Power King Kong ape in his body, he raised his head to look at Zhao Ying and the other 2, and a sinister smile gradually appeared on his face. "Zhao Ying, and the 2 of you, did you have fun chasing me just now?" Seeing that Yu Haoran, who was still desperately hiding, was not running away at this time, but was instead smiling at her with a sinister expression, Zhao Ying suddenly had a bad feeling in her heart. After all, since the beginning of the faction life and death battle, Yu Haoran had used up all his trump cards. Who knew if he still had a way to make a comeback in the end? Originally, I still had a trump card in my hand. If this trump card was used, the entire 100 Feet Peak, except for me, Yu Haoran, and a few close people, the rest would die tragically. Stimulating the blood essence of the Power King Kong ape in his body, but forcefully suppressing the changes in his body, Yu Haoran said with a pitiful expression. However, The faction life and death battle between Qingyun Peak and 100 Feet Peak, to put it bluntly, is a personal grudge between me, Zhao Ji, and Zhao Xinyu. It has nothing to do with these disciples. Although I, Yu Haoran, am called a butcher behind my back, a devil who kills without blinking, in the end, I am still a disciple of the 100 Feet Gate. I, Yu Haoran, can't and don't want to use the lives of tens of thousands of people in 100 Feet Peak to be a scapegoat for Zhao Ji, Zhao Xinyu, and the Zhao family behind you. Listening to Yu Haoran's pitiful self-description, Zhao Ying and the other two did not immediately make a move, because they wanted to see what Yu Haoran wanted to do. Fortunately, even God is dissatisfied with your Zhao family's actions, or rather, he is angry. At the most critical moment, he actually helped me remove the power of the artifact that was limited by the secret transformation technique. At this point, Yu Haoran directly released the transformation that he had been suppressing just now. In an instant, he turned into a power King Kong ape that was 57 meters tall and emitted a strong, murderous aura. Now, it is time for your Zhao family to suffer my, Yu Haoran's, anger. Chapter 394. 100 Feet Peak, in the area where the inner disciples lived. Seeing Yu Haoran instantly transform into a 57-meter tall, large power King Kong ape that emitted a strong, murderous aura, Zhaoying knew that something was wrong. She quickly called out to her other two companions. Not good, run quickly. The reason why Zhao Ji dared to provoke the sect life and death battle between 100 Feet Peak and Clear Cloud Peak was not only because his cultivation had already broken through to the peak of the 9th grade Martial Emperor, but also because the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion behind him had provided him with a magic tool that could restrict Yu Haoran's transformation. It was a magic tool that had reached the upper grade of the Emperor realm. According to the expert who provided the magic tool to the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion, this upper grade of the Emperor realm magic tool could restrict the transformation for at least 3 hours. It was because of this upper grade of the Emperor realm magic tool that could restrict Yu Haoran's transformation that Zhao Ji finally made up his mind to use the sect life and death battle to eliminate Yu Haoran, who had caused him to suffer losses everywhere. Now, less than 10 minutes had passed since the casting of the magic tool that restricted the transformation, and the upper grade of the Emperor realm magic tool had already lost its effect. This made Zhao Ying suspect that the woman from the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion wanted to borrow Yu Haoran's hand to directly kill Zhao Ji and Zhao Xinyu, who had brought her shame. It's too late to escape now. Looking at Zhao Ying and the other two who had turned around to escape, Yu Haoran, who had transformed into a large power King Kong ape, roared with his mouth wide open. Then he directly stretched out 2 huge palms and grabbed at the escaping Zhao Ying and the other two like lightning. Although using the extreme speed of a peak 9th grade Martial King allowed Zhao Ying and the other two to escape very quickly, facing the huge palms of the 5th grade rank 7 power King Kong ape, their final fate was still to be caught by the huge palms that were even faster. In the end, they were tightly held in the palms of the 2 huge palms. After capturing Zhao Ying and the other two alive, Yu Haoran did not immediately kill them. Instead, he held the 3 of them tightly and walked step by step toward Zhao Ji, who was fighting with the black bear. Zhao Ji. When he was less than 100 meters away from Zhao Ji, Yu Haoran suddenly roared. Originally, he was still blaming Zhao Ying and the other two in his heart. He blamed them, who were peak 9th grade Martial King experts, for not being able to eliminate Yu Haoran after such a long time had passed. After suddenly hearing Yu Haoran's roar, his heart suddenly shuddered, and his attention was slightly distracted. As a black bear that had inherited the bloodline of the ancient Black Sea of Death, it had an unimaginable sensitivity to battle. Just as Zhao Ji was slightly distracted, it seized the opportunity to land a heavy punch on Zhao Ji's shoulder, gaining the first advantage since the start of the fight. Zhao Ji endured the pain from his shoulder and quickly retreated a dozen or so steps. He turned his head to look at the Power King Kong ape that was approaching him, as well as Zhao Ying and the other two in the hands of the Power King Kong ape. His face revealed a terrified expression. Zhao Ji, I presume that these three peak ninth-grade Martial King experts with the surname Zhao are not only your confidants, they're also the foundation of the Zhao clan behind you. Yu Haoran said with an abnormally calm tone as he lifted up Zhao Ying and the other two in his hands. Yu Haoran, what do you want to do? Zhao Ji asked with a trembling voice as he retreated a few steps. What do I want to do? Yu Haoran asked back. Then he exerted strength in his palms and directly crushed Zhao Ying and the other two. If your Zhao clan loses these three peak ninth-grade Martial King experts, I wonder if your strength will be affected. After crushing Zhao Ying and the other two, Yu Haoran continued to ask coldly. If your Zhao clan loses Zhao Ji, who is a peak ninth-grade Martial King and is the gate master of the 100 Qi Gate, I wonder if you will suffer a devastating blow. Yu Haoran took out the purple rod and pointed it at Zhao Haoqing, who was standing in front of the ruins of the treasury, as he spoke with an even colder voice. If your Zhao clan loses Zhao Haoqing, a Martial King Doyen, I wonder if your clan will be exterminated. Yu Haoran, the battle between you and Zhao Ji belongs to the battle between the 100 Qi Peak and the Qingyun Peak. It has nothing to do with me, Zhao Haoqing, and the Doyen Peak. Zhao Haoqing, whose cultivation was far inferior to Zhao Ji's, was suddenly pointed at by Yu Haoran with a purple rod. He jumped up like a cat that had its tail stepped on. That's right. Yu Haoran nodded. To everyone's surprise, he actually agreed with Zhao Haoyu's reasoning. However, Yu Haoran's following words caused everyone to return to the fact that it was only natural. Therefore, I plan to kill Zhao Ji and destroy the entire 100 Qi Peak. Then, in the name of the Qingyun Peak, I will have a factional death match with your Doyen Peak. I strongly object. After hearing Yu Haoran's plan to have a factional death match with the Doyen Peak, Zhao Haoqing immediately objected strongly. However, Yu Haoran ignored Zhao Haoqing's strong objection. Instead, he looked straight at Zhao Ji and roared with murderous intent. Zhao Ji, prepare to die. Since he didn't receive the order to retreat, he continued to cooperate with the attack. Therefore, when He Xiong saw Yu Haoran make the first move, he immediately rushed up. Relying on his strong defense, he forcefully endured Zhao Ji's counterattack and attacked Zhao Ji's vital points with heavy punches. Originally, Zhao Ji and He Xiong's strength were evenly matched. Now, facing He Xiong, who completely ignored defense and injured both of them, Zhao Ji immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. With Yu Haoran, who had reached the peak of the 7th rank of the 5th rank, and whose true strength was close to the beginning of the 9th rank of the martial royal realm, it was even more difficult for him to resist. More importantly, Zhao Ji had been guarding against Yu Haoran's sudden use of the staff technique that was close to the martial venerable realm. Under the circumstances where he couldn't concentrate, he was surrounded by danger. After the two people and the bear exchanged dozens of blows, He Xiong was hit 6 times by Zhao Ji, 4 of which were on his vital points. However, relying on his naturally strong defense, He Xiong wasn't affected at all. Yu Haoran relied on his speed and dexterity to dodge and was only hit once by Zhao Ji. However, the place where he was hit wasn't a vital point, so he wasn't affected at all. On the other hand, Zhao Ji, he was hit a total of 7 times by He Xiong's huge palm, 5 of which were on his vital points. Yu Haoran, who had transformed into a Power King Kong ape, used the purple staff to hit Zhao Ji 5 times. All 5 attacks were on his vital points. If it weren't for the low-grade Emperor Realm defensive magic tool on Zhao Ji's body that had absorbed nearly 90% of the damage, his body would have crumbled and his soul would have left his body a long time ago. However, even with the protection of a low-grade Emperor Stage magic tool, He Xiong and Yu Haoran, whose strength wasn't inferior to his in the slightest, still suffered heavy injuries from the 10 consecutive attacks on his vital points. Zhao Ji, who relied on a palm technique that could injure both sides, forcefully endured 2 heavy blows from Yu Haoran and He Xiong. He temporarily distanced himself from each other and then looked at Yu Haoran and He Xiong with a gloomy expression. At this moment, Zhao Ji was no longer thinking about how to use the sex life-or-death battle to kill Yu Haoran. Instead, he was thinking about how to save his life. He was the one who proposed the sex life-or-death battle. His goal was to kill Yu Haoran and the Qingyun faction that he was in. Therefore, it was impossible for him to plead with Yu Haoran and beg him to let him live. The only chance to save his life now was to let Zhao Haoqing make a move. Chapter 395. 100 Feet Peak, in front of the ruins of the treasury. Uncle, when I reached an agreement with the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion, Protector Lei imparted a secret technique to me. This secret technique can allow me to raise my cultivation by a whole realm in a short time. That is to say, after using this secret technique, I will have the cultivation of a peak 9th grade martial saint for a short time. With the cultivation of a peak 9th grade martial saint, even if Yu Haoran uses that staff technique, I have absolute confidence in blocking it and killing Yu Haoran. Although the side effects of using this secret technique are great, now that we are at a critical juncture of life and death, I can't care so much for the time being. After all, according to Yu Haoran's vengeful personality, after killing me, he will definitely launch a death match against the Elder Peak. His goal is to eliminate you. I'm afraid that the Zhao clan that has lost you and me isn't far from true annihilation. If he wanted Zhao Haoqing to stand out and help him, he had to let him see the hope of victory. Therefore, Zhao Ji used the method of sending sound transmissions to fabricate a big lie. Jier, what do you want to do? After hearing Zhao Ji's secret sound transmission, the originally depressed Zhao Haoqing felt joy in his heart and hurriedly asked, Uncle, using that secret technique requires at least 3 to 5 seconds. I hope that you can buy me 3 to 5 seconds. Hearing the uncontrollable joy in Zhao Haoqing's voice, Zhao Ji knew that he had been tricked and hurriedly spoke of his plan. Okay, for his own life and for the survival of the Zhao clan, Zhao Haoqing did not have time to think. While nodding in agreement to Zhao Ji's request, he directly appeared in front of Yu Haoran in a flash. However, Zhao Haoqing did not attack Yu Haoran or the Black Bear. He knew very well that he was only a 5th grade martial emperor. He was no match for Yu Haoran, nor was he a match for the Black Bear. It was even more impossible for him to be a match for Yu Haoran and the Black Bear together. Therefore, he planned to use verbal communication to stall for 3 to 5 seconds. Yu Haoran, you must be very clear about the requirements of a sex factional deathmatch. If you want to promote a deathmatch between Senior Statesman Peak and Qingyun Peak. Not good. Zhao Haoqing, who had originally refused to accept the deathmatch between Elder Peak and Clear Cloud Peak, suddenly changed his attitude. This made Yu Haoran realize that something was wrong. When he saw Zhao Ji, who was standing behind Zhao Haoqing, quietly take out a cyan talisman, which he recognized as an escape talisman, he immediately guessed Zhao Ji's intention. Therefore, Yu Haoran directly used one strike to the sky, hoping to interrupt Zhao Ji's idea of using the escape talisman to escape. Unfortunately, Zhao Haoqing's slow speech had attracted Yu Haoran's attention for nearly 3 seconds. When he reacted and used one strike to the sky, the escape talisman in Zhao Ji's hand turned into a cyan light, which then enveloped Zhao Ji. Seeing Yu Haoran rushing over with a purple stick, Zhao Ji, who was enveloped by the cyan light, showed a mocking smile on his face and mouthed 3 words. Wait for me. Damn it. Seeing Zhao Ji completely disappear from the 100 feet peak after being enveloped by the green light, Yu Haoran, who was burning with rage, vented the power he had gathered in his purple cudgel on a nearby boulder. Boom! As the huge rock was smashed into pieces, Zhao Haoqing's angry roar was heard. Zhao Ji, you sinister villain, you lied to me. Zhao Haoqing's angry roar happened to wake Yu Haoran up. Turning his head to look at the angry Zhao Haoqing, he instantly had another target to vent his anger on. Black Bear, smash him into a meat patty for me. Pointing at Zhao Haoqing, Yu Haoran roared angrily. Roar! Feeling the burning anger in Yu Haoran's body, Black Bear roared to the sky and directly raised his 2 paws, fiercely slapping at Zhao Haoqing. Originally, with Zhao Haoqing's cultivation as a 5th-grade martial king, although he was definitely not a match for Black Bear, he could at least resist a few moves. However, the anger and sadness of being deceived by Zhao Ji made him fall into despair. Facing Black Bear's paws, he neither resisted nor dodged. He just lowered his head and thought about his own worries. Boom! The giant paws directly smashed Zhao Haoqing into minced meat. When Black Bear withdrew his paws, from the pile of minced meat floated out a Zhao Haoqing with the same appearance and temperament as Zhao Haoqing, but his body was very illusory. Soul destruction. Seeing the soul floating out of the minced meat, Yu Haoran did not have the slightest intention of letting Zhao Haoqing go. Using the purple staff in his hand, he used a secret skill that could destroy souls and directly strangled Zhao Haoqing's soul. From the time Zhao Ji used the escape talisman to the time Yu Haoran strangled Zhao Haoqing's soul, the whole process happened in a very short time. It was so short that Zhao Haoqing's soul turned into a wisp of green smoke and disappeared between heaven and earth. Everyone present was still in a daze. Everyone from the 100 Feet Peak, come out. After strangling Zhao Haoqing's soul, the burning anger in Yu Haoran's heart was finally extinguished. It also allowed him to calm down for the time being. Thinking that he had forced Zhao Ji to betray the sect master and kill Zhao Haoqing because of the sect life and death battle, then the next thing to do was to deal with the remaining disciples of the 100 Feet Peak. As for how to deal with the remaining disciples of the 100 Feet Peak, Yu Haoran did not know for the time being. However, he was very clear on one point, and that was to cut weeds by the roots. Following Yu Haoran's shout, the tens of thousands of disciples, deacons, hall masters, and elders in the residential area of the 100 Feet Peak left their residences in 2s and 3s and then gathered in front of the ruins of the treasury. However, there was also a portion of people who left the residential area and quietly circled to the back mountain, intending to use the back mountain path to escape the 100 Feet Peak. Black Bear, go guard the back mountain path for me. Don't interrogate anyone who wants to use the back mountain path to escape the 100 Feet Peak. Kill them directly. Although those people's movements were very stealthy when they circled to the back mountain path, they could not escape the surveillance of Thaling's divine sense. After hearing Thaling's reminder, Yu Haoran did not need to think too much. Those who intended to use the back mountain path to escape were either disciples of the Zhao clan or Zhao Ji's confidants. And such people were the ones that Yu Haoran planned to clean up next. Perhaps because of Zhao Haoqing's blood, Black Bear's killing intent was completely aroused. After hearing Yu Haoran's command, he roared and rushed to the back mountain of the 100 Feet Peak. Eldest senior brother, please make a trip back to Qingyun Peak and bring the other senior brothers and junior brothers here. After Black Bear went to kill those who wanted to escape the 100 Feet Peak, Yu Haoran turned to Chu Zhongyu, who was standing behind Gao Wamping, and ordered, "Okay, I'll go right away." Chapter 396. 100 Feet Peak, in front of the ruins of the treasury. Yu Haoran. Perhaps it was because Jiang Minglu wasn't a member of the Zhao clan, or perhaps it was because he had a fierce quarrel with Zhao Ji because of Yu Haoran and the faction life and death battle, causing him to be thrown into the cold palace by Zhao Ji. Not to mention participating in the faction life and death battle this time. Jiang Minglu didn't even have the authority to ask about it. Of course, it was also because he didn't participate in the faction life and death battle. Otherwise, with his cultivation at the peak of 9th grade martial king, he would certainly be the same as Zhao Ying and the other two, the main force chasing after Yu Haoran. Vice Peak Master Jiang. Yu Haoran still respected Jiang Minglu, so when Jiang Minglu saluted him with the identity of a loser, he quickly ended the secret transformation technique and returned the salute with his original appearance. Yu Haoran, I know that according to the rules of the sect, the winner of the faction life and death battle has the authority to decide the fate of the loser. Even if you kill all of us right now, no one will accuse you of anything, and no one will say anything afterwards. seeing that Yu Haoran not only ended the secret transformation technique on his own initiative, but also treated him with respect. Jiang Minglu let out a sigh of relief at the same time. Then, he took the risk to plead for the disciples behind him who didn't cultivate well. But the people behind me are innocent and pitiful, because they don't know what the faction life and death battle means. So, I, Jiang Minglu, represent these innocent disciples and plead with you. Can you let them live? Even if you take my life for this. Jiang Minglu directly knelt down and begged with a sad expression. Martial Uncle Jiang, seeing that Jiang Minglu was willing to give up his life for the disciples behind him who didn't know anything, Yu Haoran quickly extended his hand to help him up. Martial Uncle Jiang, don't worry. Yu Haoran, am not a devil who kills without blinking, and I like what you all say. As long as the disciples behind you aren't disciples of the Zhao clan, nor are they trusted aides of Zhao Ji, then I won't harm them in the slightest. Yu Haoran guaranteed. After getting Yu Haoran's guarantee, Jiang Minglu was so happy that he almost patted his chest and promised, Martial nephew, you can rest assured about this. I guarantee with my life that these disciples behind me have no relationship with the Zhao clan or Zhao Ji. Martial Uncle Jiang, I believe in you. Looking straight into Jiang Minglu's eyes, Yu Haoran nodded solemnly. Then, he changed his tone and pointed at the disciples behind him. But I don't trust them, so what? Jiang Minglu asked nervously. After glancing at Jiang Minglu, Yu Haoran turned around and said to Gao Wanping, the peak master of the law enforcement peak. Peak master, I'm afraid no one in the entire sect is more suitable than your law enforcement peak for investigating a person's origin. So, I want to ask you to send the elite disciples of the law enforcement peak to help me investigate the remaining disciples of the 100 Feet peak, and help me find the disciples of the Zhao clan and Zhao Ji's trusted aides. In the face of Yu Haoran's request, Gao Wanping did not dare to be arrogant. He stood up immediately and said politely, Martial nephew Yu, investigating the remnants of the traitor Zhao Ji is not only the responsibility of the law enforcement peak, but also the obligation that we should fulfill. So, it's not a matter of whether I ask for it or not. However, although Gao Wanping agreed without hesitation, in order to prevent the tens of thousands of disciples behind Jiang Minglu from being wronged and hating him in the future, Yu Haoran suggested this as a precaution. Although I believe that the law enforcement peak can be fair and just, these disciples may not believe it. So, I hope that Deputy Peak Master Jiang and my Qingyun Peak senior brother, Chu Zhongyu, can participate in the entire investigation as a jury. Speaking of this, Yu Haoran looked at Gao Wanping and asked in an unquestionable tone, what do you think? Okay, although the participation of outsiders in the trial would expose some shameful means of the law enforcement peak, considering that Yu Haoran had just used a lot of trump cards and forced Zhao Ji to give up everything in the 100 Qi Gate and betray the sect, and even the spirit of Zhao Haoqing, the first elder of the Statesman Peak, was strangled by him without hesitation. Gao Wanping, who was afraid of offending Yu Haoran, could only agree obediently. Martial Uncle Jiang, you can rest assured now. After getting Gao Wanping's consent, Yu Haoran said to Jiang Minglu with a smile, of course, with himself and Chu Zhongyu as jurors, he could prevent the people of the law enforcement peak from lynching. In case something went wrong during the trial, Chu Zhongyu could also contact Yu Haoran directly. Therefore, if Jiang Minglu was not satisfied with Yu Haoran's arrangement just now, he would be unappreciative. Martial uncles and martial uncles. Although the life and death battle between Qingyun Peak and 100 Qi Peak has ended, there is still a more important thing to do. After dealing with the fate of the remaining disciples of the 100 Feet Peak, Yu Haoran turned around and cupped his fists, making a request to the 34 Peak Masters. Therefore, I hope that you can wait for a little while. Martial nephew Yu, I originally thought that the life and death battle between Qingyun Peak and 100 Qi Peak would go on for a long time, so I've already arranged the affairs of the peak in advance. I am very free now. Chao Yunwei, the Peak Master of Tingyun Peak, immediately stood up and said to Yu Haoran, Thank you for your understanding, Peak Master Chao. Sorry to trouble you. Although Chow Yunwei's character was not good, Yu Haoran still gave him face, since he was the first to stand up and support him. Seeing Yu Haoran solemnly thanking him, Chow Yunwei, who was flattered, quickly waved his hand and said, "No trouble at all. Martial nephew Yu, there are 2 deputy peak masters in Hung Peak. It doesn't matter if I, as the peak master, go back or not." Seeing that Chow Yunwei had taken the lead, the peak master of Hung Peak stood up and expressed his position. Subsequently, except for Gao Wamping of Law Enforcement Peak, the 2 deputy sect masters, Lai Yin and Zhong Fakin, and the peak master of Beastmaster Peak did not stand up to support. The remaining 20 peak masters were eager to express their positions to avoid being hated by Yu Haoran. "Thank you, martial uncles, for your understanding." Yu Haoran, thank you." Yu Haoran thanked the 20 peak masters again. As for the other 4 peak masters who did not express their positions, Yu Haoran naturally had his own thoughts. "Peak master, why didn't you take the initiative to express your position just now?" The sword without trace, who was standing behind the peak master of Beastmaster Peak, saw that the other peak masters were scrambling to express their goodwill to Yu Haoran. Only his peak master was sitting there motionlessly. The sword without trace could not help but persuade him. "If I don't express my position, our Beastmaster Peak is also the sect's least valued faction." In the face of the sword without trace's persuasion, the peak master of Beastmaster Peak explained in an indifferent tone, "If I express my position, the special geographical location of the 100 Chi Gate will not give us a chance to be valued by Yu Haoran. Since the result is the same whether I express my position or not, why should I give up my old face and stick to Yu Haoran's cold ass?" Sigh. Originally, the sword without trace wanted to say that Yu Haoran was not that kind of person. However, after hearing the Peak Master's explanation and thinking of the predicament Beastmaster Peak was facing, he could only sigh and stop persuading him. "Ninth junior brother, I found that as long as I don't see you for a while, you will definitely do something earth-shattering." Chapter 397. 100 Feet Peak, in front of the ruins of the treasury. Along with the familiar teasing, the 11 disciples from the Qingyun faction quickly landed in front of the ruins of the 100 Feet Peak treasury. "Fifth senior brother, if junior brother doesn't do something that can shake the heavens and earth, how can I show off the might of our Qingyun faction?" Following Huang Zhonghua's teasing, Yu Haoran said half jokingly and half seriously. Then, he nodded at Gongsun Yuding, whose eyes were full of worry. "Zhonghua, speak less." Seeing that Huang Zhonghua had just arrived at the 100 Feet Peak and didn't pay attention to the surroundings before teasing Yu Haoran, Chu Zhongyu's face darkened. After all, Yu Haoran had just defeated the 100 Feet Peak faction's Yu Haoran, and his momentum was at its peak. Huang Zhonghua's teasing could very well weaken Yu Haoran's momentum and image. Sticking his tongue out at Yu Haoran, Huang Zhonghua obediently stood beside his 4th senior brother. "All of you, come here." After scolding Huang Zhonghua, Chu Zhongyu ordered the 10 junior brothers and junior sisters, except for Yu Haoran, "Come with me and greet the peak leaders of each faction." Facing the Qingyun faction's greeting, all the peak leaders present, including the 2 vice leaders, Lai Yin and Zhong Fakin, hurriedly stood up and said politely. After greeting the peak leaders present, Chu Zhongyu asked Yu Haoran, "Ninth junior brother, what orders do you have for me to bring these junior brothers and junior sisters here?" "Search the mountain," Yu Haoran ordered as he raised his head to look at the towering 100 Feet Peak. "Search the mountain?" Chu Zhongyu repeated, not understanding. "In the future, this 100 Feet Peak will be the place where I, Yu Haoran, cultivate. It will also be the resting place of our Qingyun Peak's divine guardian beast, the black bear. From tomorrow onwards, I don't want any living creatures on the 100 Feet Peak other than myself and the black bear." Although Yu Haoran's tone was very flat, in everyone's ears there was a kind of chilling and threatening feeling of terror. "I got it." Nodding his head, Chu Zhongyu didn't question Yu Haoran any further about why he wanted to use the 100 Feet Peak as his place of cultivation. "Yu Haoran, if you want to search the mountain, just let me use my divine sense to scan the area. Why bother your senior brothers?" Hearing that Yu Haoran had summoned all the disciples of the Qingyun faction to the 100 Feet Peak with the sole purpose of searching the mountain, Faling asked in confusion. Faling, you don't understand. Yu Haoran sneered as he turned his head to look at the hypocritical peak masters behind him. The 100 Feet Peak is not only the symbol of the sect master of the 100 Qi Gate, but is also the blessed land with the densest spiritual qi of heaven and earth. If I didn't say anything and didn't reveal the slightest bit of ownership of the 100 Feet Peak, I believe that many people's next goal would be to fight for it. Having all the disciples of the Qingyun faction search the mountain is not only an oath of sovereignty by me, Yu Haoran, over the 100 Feet Peak, but also a warning to those who have designs on the 100 Feet Peak. So that's how it is. After hearing Yu Haoran's explanation, Faling nodded his head in understanding, but he couldn't help but sigh at the complexity of the world and the viciousness of human hearts. Ninth junior brother, should we let the junior brothers and sisters search the mountain now? Since he knew the reason Yu Haoran wanted to search the mountain, he wanted to know if they should search the mountain now or later. Shaking his head, Yu Haoran indicated for Chu Zhongyu not to be anxious for the time being, then turned his gaze to Gao Wanping. AI, seeing the hint and warning in Yu Haoran's eyes, Gao Wanping couldn't help but feel some regret. He regretted agreeing to Yu Haoran's request, but now that things had come to this, he could only brace himself. Otherwise, who knew if the unpredictable Yu Haoran would fall out with him on the spot? Ahem! Gao Wanping coughed lightly and waited for everyone's attention to be focused on him before speaking. Everyone, please listen to me. The results of the life and death battle between Qingyun Peak and 100 Feet Peak are out. Qingyun Peak has obtained a complete victory. Cupping his hands, Gao Wanping cupped his hands to Yu Haoran and Chu Zhongyu, who represented Qingyun Peak, and said, I represent the Enforcement Peak to congratulate everyone from Qingyun Peak. Peak Lord, you are too courteous. As the eldest senior brother, Chu Zhongyu represented Qingyun Peak and returned the salute. Although Zhao Ji, the Peak Lord of 100 Feet Peak and the Gate Lord of the 100 Qi Gate, is not dead. The moment he escaped from 100 Feet Peak and the 100 Qi Gate, not only was he not the Gate Lord of the 100 Qi Gate, but he was also the traitor that the 100 Qi Gate would pursue in the future. Gao Wanping, what do you mean? Lai Yin, who had vaguely guessed Gao Wanping's intentions, asked with a gloomy expression. Deputy Gate Lord Lai, don't be impatient. Listen to me slowly. Gao Wanping signaled Lai Yin to not be anxious and continued. As the saying goes, a country can't go a day without a ruler, and a family can't go a day without a leader. Now, the problem that our 100 Qi Gate urgently needs to solve is to elect a new Gate Lord. Then, the new Gate Lord will lead the 100 Qi Gate to continue developing and strengthening. Gao Wanping, you are in such a hurry to propose a candidate for the Gate Lord position. Do you intend to compete for the position of Gate Lord? Seeing that Gao Wanping had finally exposed his intentions, Lai Yin couldn't help but mock him. Senior brother Lai, you don't have to use words to stop me. Faced with Lai Yin's mockery, Gao Wanping wasn't angry and continued to speak calmly. Since the day the 100 Qi Gate was established, the Peak Master of the Law Enforcement Peak has never participated in the competition for the position of Gate Lord. Now that it's my turn, I will definitely not break this rule. Oh, so senior brother Gao has no intention of competing for the position of Gate Lord? Zhong Fakin couldn't help but ask in surprise after hearing Gao Wanping's declaration that he wouldn't break the rule that had been passed down for thousands of years. That's right. Nodding solemnly, Gao Wanping said loudly in front of everyone present. As for the position of 100 Qi Gate's Gate Lord, I, Gao Wanping, will neither participate nor have any interest in competing for it. After hearing Gao Wanping's official declaration, the few Peak Masters who had the strength to compete for the position of Gate Lord couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. After all, the Law Enforcement Peak, which had never participated in the battle between factions, had accumulated over hundreds of years. Their overall strength was almost the strongest faction in 100 Qi Gate. Gao Wanping was a 5th-grade martial king expert and had the support of several elders from the Senior Statesman's Peak. If he participated in the competition for the position of Gate Lord, apart from the two deputy Gate Lords, none of the remaining Peak Masters would be a match for Gal Wamping. However, before the crowd could completely relax, Gal Wamping's tone changed. There was a trace of a bitter smile on his face, but there was also a trace of a sinister smile on his face. Although Gal Wamping won't participate in the competition for the position of Gate Lord, as the Peak Master of the Law Enforcement Peak, I have the right and obligation to recommend a candidate for the position of new Gate Lord. At this point, Gal Wamping suddenly stopped talking and looked at the crowd with a smile on his face. Junior Brother Gal, since you already have a candidate in mind, why don't you say it directly so that everyone can see the strength and character of the candidate for the position of Gate Lord, and whether they are competent for the position of new Gate Lord? Zhao Ji suddenly mentioned that he had a candidate for the position of Gate Lord, but he refused to say it directly. This made the most competitive Lai Yin feel like an ant on a hot pan, spinning in circles. That's right. Senior Brother Gao, if you have a candidate in mind, just say it directly so that we can all help you analyze and see if he is suitable for the position of new Gate Lord. Zhong Fakin, who also had the qualifications to compete for the position of Gate Lord, quickly echoed. Then, the other three Peak Masters who also had a certain amount of fighting power also quickly echoed. Chapter 398. 100 Feet Peak, in front of the ruins of the treasury. Although Gal Wamping's gaze was on Chu Zhongyu, Yu Haoran happened to be standing beside Chu Zhongyu. This gave everyone the illusion that Gal Wamping's preferred candidate was Yu Haoran. When they saw that Gal Wamping's preferred candidate for the Sect Master was Yu Haoran, Lai Yin, Zhong Fakin, and the other three Peak Masters couldn't help but feel their hearts skip a beat. Although Yu Haoran's cultivation wasn't high, being only a mid-5th grade martial master, the strength and methods he possessed, the top-notch demonic potential he displayed, and his unparalleled influence among the younger disciples were probably unparalleled. If Yu Haoran really wanted to participate in the competition for the position of Sect Master, both Lai Yin and Zhong Fakin could only choose to abstain. They didn't even have the courage to oppose. After all, Yu Haoran's vengeful personality had already been revealed through the battles that had shaken the entire sect. Whoever dared to oppose him taking over the position of Sect Master would be his enemy. No one in the entire 100 Chi Gate was willing to become Yu Haoran's enemy. Furthermore, Yu Haoran had just announced the ownership of 100 Feet Peak through the actions of the Qingyun faction's disciples. 100 Feet Peak was the symbol of the 100 Chi Gate's Sect Master faction. It also represented Yu Haoran's attitude towards participating in the competition for the position of Sect Master. Therefore, Lai Yin, Zhong Fakin, and the other three Peak Masters had already decided to withdraw from the competition for the position of Sect Master. They were also considering whether they should hand over a portion of their power in exchange for the satisfaction of a new Sect Master, Yu Haoran, so that he wouldn't suppress the conflicts between the factions through the sect deathmatch. The person I like is from Qingyun Peak. After keeping everyone in suspense for nearly 5 minutes, Gal Wamping finally spoke again and announced his preferred candidate. Qingyun Peak. Wasn't it Yu Haoran? At this moment, no one was in the mood to pay attention to who Gal Wamping favored. They were all ready to show their support and approval to the new sect leader, Yu Haoran. Gal Wamping swept his gaze across all the Peak Masters present, especially Lai Yin and Zhong Fakin's expressions. Gal Wamping immediately felt as if he had eaten a secret peach. The chief disciple of Qingyun Peak, Chu Zhongyu. Congratulations to. Chao Yunwei from Tingyun Peak immediately stepped forward to congratulate Yu Haoran after Gal Wamping announced the candidate he had chosen. However, before Yu Haoran's name could be said, Chao Yunwei was stunned for a moment. He then turned to look at Gal Wamping, wondering if he had heard wrongly. In fact, Chao Yunwei was not the only one who doubted whether he had heard wrongly. The 30 over Peak Masters present all looked at Gal Wamping with the same expression. What's wrong? Did I not make myself clear enough? Gal Wamping shrugged when he saw everyone's puzzled expression. He repeated his words with an expression that said, "How could you not have heard it just now?" Didn't I just say that the candidate I like is the chief disciple of Qingyun Peak, Chu Zhongyu? Eldest senior brother. Congratulations on becoming the new sect leader of 100 Qi Gate. Compared to those peak masters who had complicated thoughts, the 11 disciples from Qingyun Peak did not have so many messy thoughts in their hearts. After hearing Gao Wamping announce for the first time that his candidate for the sect leader was Chu Zhongyu, other than shock, there was only joy in their hearts. Huang Zonghua, who was more lively and did not pay attention to the situation, was the first to congratulate Chu Zhongyu. Lu Guangwei and the others also hurried forward to congratulate him. However, while Huang Zonghua and the others reacted quickly, Chu Zhongyu was still in a daze. As the eldest senior brother of Qingyun Peak, Chu Zhongyu, who was in charge of the affairs of Qingyun Peak, was well aware of the importance of the position of the sect leader of 100 Qi Gate. He also knew that the main reason for the unquenchable factional disputes in the sect was because of the position of the sect leader. Among them, the most competitive and most promising people to take over the position of the sect leader were the two deputy sect leaders, Lai Yin and Zhong Fakin. Even if Lai Yin and Zhong Fakin, the two deputy sect leaders, had no intention of taking over the position of the sect leader, according to seniority, it was impossible for Chu Zhongyu, whose aptitude was shallow, cultivation was average, and did not have much influence. Out of the corner of his eye, he inadvertently glanced at Yu Haoran. Chu Zhongyu suddenly remembered the eye contact between his ninth junior brother and Gao Wanping before the factional life-and-death battle between Qingyun Peak and 100 Qi Peak. His ninth junior brother had promised him an unexpected opportunity. He immediately knew that the reason why Gao Wanping recommended him as the new sect leader was probably because of the deal between him and his ninth junior brother. Ninth junior brother, did all of this come from you? Turning to look at Yu Haoran, Chu Zhongyu's tone did not contain any surprise. In fact, his expression was a little angry as he questioned him. Seeing Chu Zhongyu's slightly angry expression after guessing why Gao Wanping had recommended him as the new sect leader, Yu Haoran knew that things were not going well. He knew that his decision to act on his own had hurt his first senior brother's self-esteem. First senior brother, I'm sorry. Fortunately, Yu Haoran was a veteran of the battlefield and knew how to resolve his first senior brother's anger and dissatisfaction. Therefore, he immediately apologized and made a second promise. First senior brother, if you have no thoughts or interest in the position of the new sect leader, you can completely reject the Peak Master's good intentions. I think the Peak Master would not mind. Chu Zhongyu had originally wanted to criticize Yu Haoran and ask him if he could discuss with them or leak some information in advance before making a decision about the fate of the Qingyun faction disciples. However, Yu Haoran's sudden apology and promise made the little anger in Chu Zhongyu's heart disappear completely. First senior brother, are you really not interested in the position of sect leader? The intelligent Huang Zonghua immediately saw the unhappiness between Yu Haoran and Chu Zhongyu. Combining the conversation between the two and Yu Haoran's apology and promise, he knew the true reason for Chu Zhongyu's unhappiness. Therefore, the considerate Huang Zonghua hurriedly recommended himself with a cheeky smile. Ninth junior brother, since first senior brother is not interested, why don't you let me do it? I've been drooling over the position of sect leader for a long time. Shut up. Scram. Chu Zhongyu and Yu Haoran had the same reaction and attitude toward Huang Zonghua's recommendation. If you don't want to, then just don't want to. Why are you so fierce? Huang Zonghua pretended to be heartbroken as he complained. Ninth junior brother, to be honest, becoming the sect leader of the 100 Qi Gate was my greatest wish when I entered the 100 Qi Gate and participated in the disciple aptitude test. Perhaps it was because Yu Haoran had taken the initiative to apologize and promise, or perhaps it was because of Huang Zonghua's jesting just now, but Chu Zhongyu knew why he was so inexplicably angry at Yu Haoran. The reason for all of this was that it wasn't that he wasn't interested in the position of sect leader of the 100 Qi Gate. On the contrary, the position of sect leader had always been his goal and goal. Yu Haoran's actions of his own accord seemed to have taken the initiative to reveal the desires in his heart, exposing the thoughts that he had always wanted to hide in front of everyone. It was difficult for him to clean up the mess for the time being. However, Chu Zhongyu had already thought it through. Wasn't the position of sect leader the goal that he was fighting for? Now, with the strong support of Ninth Junior Brother and the Peak Master, he already had the qualifications and ability to compete with the two deputy sect leaders, Lai Yin and Zhong Fakin, for the position of sect leader. Why wouldn't he take this opportunity to fight for it? Chapter 399, 100 Feet Peak, in front of the ruins of the treasury. Ninth Junior Brother, you've put in so much effort to help me ascend to the position of sect master of the 100 Chi Gate. If I, Chu Zhongyu, don't know what's good for me, I'll not only fail to live up to your kind intentions, but also go against my own wishes. After facing his inner thoughts, Chu Zhongyu firmly expressed his true attitude towards the position of sect master. It was worth it. Chu Zhongyu's firm attitude made Yu Haoran feel very gratified and happy. Yu Haoran had actually thought it through carefully before appointing Chu Zhongyu as the sect master of the 100 Chi Gate. Originally, with the destruction of the 100 Chi Gate in a few years, the position of sect master of the 100 Chi Gate was not only a hot potato, but also a life-threatening talisman. However, after learning that the entire 100 Feet Peak was a top-grade martial emperor magic weapon, he had an idea. According to Thaling, the heaven-measuring ruler actually already had the ability to become a divine weapon. However, after the master who refined it was accidentally killed, the spirit of the heaven-measuring ruler's weapon spirit was somewhat damaged. Moreover, the weapon spirit was plagued by a huge poison, causing it to fall into a state of dormancy. If the poison could be removed and the damaged spirit of the weapon spirit repaired, it would be able to become a divine weapon directly. The success rate of upgrading would be as high as 90%. If the heaven-measuring ruler succeeded in becoming a divine weapon, the benefits that the master of the heaven-measuring ruler would receive would be unimaginable. Therefore, Yu Haoran had been thinking about how to keep the 100 Feet Peak in his hands. Now, through the sect deathmatch, Zhao Ji had no choice but to defect from the 100 Chi Gate, allowing him to smoothly take over the 100 Feet Peak. However, there was a hidden danger. As the symbol of the 100 Chi Gate's sect master, the 100 Feet Peak naturally belonged to the new sect master, whether morally or logically. Therefore, in order to protect 100 Feet Peak, Yu Haoran had to forcibly push his own people into the position of sect master. Of course, in order to protect the 100 Feet Peak and obtain the heaven-measuring ruler, this was only one of the reasons why Yu Haoran was willing to recommend Chu Zhongyu to be the sovereign. The other reason was that Yu Haoran found that the biggest problem facing Qingyun Peak was not the lack of talented disciples or the lack of cultivation resources, but the shortcomings and disadvantages of the disciples of Qingyun Peak. For example, eldest senior brother Chu Zhongyu. As the eldest senior brother of the Clear Cloud faction, whether it was his temperament, knowledge, or ability to deal with unexpected situations, he was much weaker than the other eldest disciples of the other factions. It wasn't because Chu Zhongyu wasn't as good as those people, but because the way Qingyun Peak handled things had affected his growth. Therefore, Yu Haoran wanted to use the experience of the 100 Chi Gate's Gate Master to improve his eyesight and experience, as well as temper his temperament and adaptability. After all, Chu Zhongyu was bound to take over Qingyun Peak in the future and become the Peak Master of Qingyun Peak. An outstanding Peak Master would also be his strongest help in conquering the world in the future. In fact, not only did he have arrangements for Chu Zhongyu, in the following period of time, he would also arrange for the disciples of the Qingyun faction to be either placed in important positions in the sect or leave Qingyun Peak to go to a suitable place for them to train. Eldest senior brother, since I asked the Peak Master to recommend you as the new sovereign, then I have full confidence that you will be elected. Since Chu Zhongyu had already expressed his will, Yu Haoran, as the mastermind of the whole thing, had to give his respected eldest senior brother a guarantee. Although Chu Zhongyu and Yu Haoran didn't deliberately lower their voices when they were talking, most of the people present simply didn't pay attention to what they were talking about. This was because they were now considering whether Chu Zhongyu, who was still inexperienced, had the qualifications and ability to become the new sovereign. Junior brother Gao, are you sure that the person you recommended is qualified to be the new sovereign of the 100 Chi Gate? Lion asked in a low voice. If the person recommended by Gao Wanping was Yu Haoran, then Lian would support him completely and would be willing to cooperate with Yu Haoran in managing and developing the 100 Chi Gate in the future. However, the person recommended by Gao Wanping was only a junior who had just broken through to the Martial King realm. This made Lian feel dissatisfied and humiliated at the same time. Therefore, he didn't care if he would offend Yu Haoran and took the initiative to question him. Senior brother Gao, Senior brother Lian's question is exactly what I'm worried about. Seeing Lian take the initiative to question Gao Wanping, Zhong Fakin, who originally had a trace of worry in her heart, immediately agreed. Does a disciple who has just broken through to the Martial King realm have the qualifications and ability to lead a huge second-rate sect? After all, he had the same thoughts as Lian. He was wholeheartedly convinced that Yu Haoran was competing for the position of sovereign and wouldn't have the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. However, he was neither convinced nor convinced that Chu Zhongyu was competing for the position of sovereign. However, Lian and Zhong Fakin dared to jump out and question Gao Wanping because of their own status and strength. After the matter, they weren't afraid of Yu Haoran and Gao Wanping's revenge. However, the other peak masters who had the ability to compete lowered their heads and pondered for a long time. In the end, they chose to remain silent. After all, it was impossible for Gao Wanping and Chu Zhongyu to have much interaction. He was willing to support Chu Zhongyu to compete for the position of sovereign either because of Yu Haoran or because he had secretly reached some kind of agreement with Yu Haoran. Questioning Gao Wanping and opposing Chu Zhongyu was equivalent to directly offending Yu Haoran. The consequences of offending Yu Haoran were probably something they couldn't bear. Senior brother Lai, junior brother Zhong, I'm only responsible for recommending candidates for the position of sovereign. As for whether or not this candidate is qualified for the position of sovereign and whether or not he can gain the approval of all of you, that has nothing to do with me. Gao Wanping. In the face of Lian and Zhong Fakin's joint questioning, Gao Wanping chuckled and directly kicked the ball to Chu Zhongyu. In other words, he had indirectly kicked the ball to Yu Haoran. Seeing that Gao Wanping was playing Tai Chi and was obviously unwilling to bear the joint attack of Lian and Zhong Fakin, and had chosen to take the initiative to step back, Yu Haoran glared at him rather unhappily. He then turned his gaze towards Lian and Zhong Fakin. I wonder if Vice Sect Leader Lai and Vice Sect Leader Zhong are dissatisfied with my eldest senior brother's competition for the position of sovereign. If there's anything you don't agree with, please point it out. He took a step forward and stood in front of Chu Zhongyu as he asked with a smile on his face. Junior nephew Yu, questioning your eldest senior brother's qualifications to take over the position of sovereign is not something that I, Lai, am deliberately targeting anyone. Seeing that Yu Haoran had taken the initiative to stand up for Chu Zhongyu, Lian took a deep breath and tried to keep his tone as calm as possible. Senior Uncle Lai, the new sovereign of the 100 Gate is related to the life and death of the entire sect. Whether or not my eldest senior brother can become the new sovereign in the end, any suggestions and opinions you have are precious. The competition for the position of sovereign was different from the previous few conflicts. Being tough was only one of the means. Convincing people with reason was the way of the king. Therefore, even though Lian was the first to jump out to question him, Yu Haoran not only did not show the slightest bit of anger or hatred, but even the way he addressed him became much more intimate. Junior nephew Yu, I'll say 3 opinions. Yu Haoran's humble attitude made Lian's originally nervous mood relax a lot. Without much hesitation, he gritted his teeth and said the 3 opinions that he had originally intended to use to refute Gao Wanping. Senior Uncle Gao, please speak, Yu Haoran said respectfully. Chapter 400. 100 Chi Peak, in front of the ruins of the treasury. Martial nephew Yu, The 100 Chi Gate is a second-rate sect in the profound sky continent. Not only do they have hundreds of thousands of disciples, they also control over a dozen affiliated third-rate sects and 50 to 60 unrated forces. More than a dozen affiliated third-rate sects and unrated forces add up to millions of people. If you want to intimidate these sects and forces, you need enough influence and strength. Martial Nephew Chu has just broken through to the Martial King realm. In terms of influence, it is not enough to intimidate those arrogant people. In terms of strength, it is also not enough to intimidate those sects and forces that have long had disloyal thoughts. Therefore, ever since the establishment of the 100 Chi Gate, every candidate who can take over the position of sect master is basically at the Martial King realm. At the very least, they have to be at the peak of the 9th level of the Martial King realm and have the strength to challenge those of a higher level. Martial Uncle Lai's suggestion is very reasonable. Yu Haoran had already thought of Lai Yan's first suggestion when he decided to recommend Chu Zhongyu to compete for the position of sect master. Furthermore, he already had a plan to deal with it. Due to the limitations of my eldest senior brother's age and cultivation time, it is unrealistic for him to break through to the Martial King realm in a short period of time. I myself will not agree. However, to intimidate the affiliated sects and forces so that they don't dare to have any disloyalty, we can't just rely on the sect master alone. We also need the help of the elders of the same sect, as well as our fellow disciples. After saying that, Yu Haoran turned his head and looked at the 30 or so peak masters who were listening carefully to him. His gaze finally stopped onto Yun Peak's peak master, Guo Dishu, and a faint smile appeared on his face as he spoke. If eldest senior brother is able to successfully become the new sect leader, then I will transform into a large power King Kong ape, hold a purple rod in my hand, and bring along the mountain guardian beast, Black Bear, to take a walk around a few disobedient sects and forces. Hearing Yu Haoran's reason and method to refute Lai's first suggestion, everyone present was speechless. If the affiliated sects and forces of the 100 Chi Gate knew in detail about the entire process of the life and death battle between the Clear Cloud Peak and the 100 Chi Peak, none of the sects and forces would welcome Yu Haoran, who had transformed into a large power King Kong ape, and bring his own mountain guardian beast as a guest. Similarly, Lai Yin had no way to refute Yu Haoran's solution. After all, Yu Haoran's protectiveness was well known. If anyone dared to bully his eldest senior brother, then Yu Haoran would dare to annihilate their entire sect. However, after more than 10 years of factional strife, Lai Yin, who had long cultivated to be as cunning as a fox, would not be stumped by Yu Haoran's solution just now. In just 10 seconds, Lai Yin revised it and raised a second objection. Martial Nephew Yu, as one of the 36 second-rate sects in the profound sky continent, the 100 Chi Gate needs to deal with many sects and forces whose strength is not inferior to, or stronger than, the 100 Chi Gate. This requires the Gate Master to possess sufficient strength, as well as sufficient experience and knowledge. When dealing with other sects and forces, he can not only display the might of our 100 Chi Gate, but also not lose to our 100 Chi Gate's limelight. Lai Yan's second suggestion was something that Yu Haoran did not expect. Therefore, he did not immediately counter Lai Yan's second suggestion. Instead, he thought about it carefully for a while. Afterwards, Yu Haoran nodded, unexpectedly agreeing with Lai Yan's second suggestion. Martial Uncle Lai, the second suggestion you mentioned is indeed what my eldest senior brother is lacking. It's not something that can be solved just by me, Yu Haoran, transforming into an exotic beast. At this point, Yu Haoran's tone changed, and he said with a hint of sarcasm, Martial Uncle Lai, other than my eldest senior brother, is there anyone in our sect who can face experts from stronger sects without fear? Could it be that Martial Uncle Lai can face experts in the martial sage realm without fear? This, in the face of Yu Haoran's counterattack, Lai Yin also did not know how to answer. Not to mention experts in the martial sage realm. Even Zhao Ji, who was at the peak of the 9th grade martial emperor realm, would be suppressed by his aura to the point that he could not speak. How could he have the confidence and courage to face experts in the martial sage realm? Martial Uncle Lai, you also know my character, Yu Haoran. You know that I see the 8 senior brothers, 2 junior brothers, and 1 junior sister in the Qingyan faction as my brothers and sisters. No matter how much trouble my brothers and sisters have caused outside, even if they brought the trouble upon themselves, as long as anyone dares to bully them or hurt them, I, Yu Haoran, will dare to destroy their entire sect. Perhaps the opponents they will provoke in the future will be so powerful that I will not be their match for the time being. However, with the potential of Yu Haoran as a top genius, I believe that no matter how powerful the opponents are, I will catch up with them one day and even surpass them. The day when I, Yu Haoran, surpass them in cultivation and strength will be the day when their divine souls will be destroyed and their entire sect will be killed. Yu Haoran's words just now seemed unreasonable and could even be said to be very excessive. However, when the people present heard it, they felt very envious and jealous in their hearts. During the carp leap over the Dragon Gate competition, why did one have to display one's talent and potential so desperately? Aside from being able to obtain better cultivation opportunities and more cultivation resources, it was also because one wanted to find a backer who could protect them when they encountered danger. When the 11 disciples of the Qingyun faction heard Yu Haoran's unreasonable words, they felt a sense of warmth in their hearts. Gongsun Yiming and Gongsun Yuding, who had just joined the Qingyun faction, were so emotional that they began to cry. Because this kind of unreasonable protection was an extravagant hope that they had always pursued, but could never obtain no matter how hard they tried. Martial nephew Yu, just pretend that I never said my second point. Lai Hua shook his head and smiled bitterly, because he had been completely moved by Yu Haoran's statement just now. For Yu Haoran to be able to make such a seemingly unreasonable but sincere promise to protect a disciple of the Clear Cloud faction showed that he valued friendship and righteousness. It was also because they were fellow disciples of the same faction. If Chu Zhongyu became the new Gate Master, how could Chu Zhongyu, as the Gate Master, not step forward to solve the problem when the disciples of the 100 Qi Gate were being treated unfairly outside? Yu Haoran, who regarded Chu Zhongyu as his big brother, would definitely step forward to help if he saw his big brother being wronged or bullied. This could be considered as indirectly standing up for the disciples of the 100 Qi Gate. In the end, whether it was Chu Zhongyu becoming the Gate Master or Huang Zonghua, who had just recommended himself, as long as they were disciples of the Qingyun faction, it would be a blessing for the 100 Qi Gate, not a curse. Therefore, not only did Lai Hua approve of Chu Zhongyu becoming the new Gate Master, but he also completely cut off any hope of becoming the Gate Master. Martial nephew Yu, the third point is actually very similar to the first and second points, so I won't mention it again. Thank you for your understanding and teachings, Martial Uncle Lai. Taking back the second point and not mentioning the third point, Lai Hua's attitude couldn't be more obvious. He no longer opposed Chu Zhongyu becoming the new Gate Master of the 100 Qi Gate. Chu Zhongyu, thank you for your kindness, Martial Uncle Lai. Chu Zhongyu also heard the change in Lai Hua's attitude. He hurriedly took 3 steps forward and solemnly thanked Lai Hua with the etiquette of a disciple. Wait. Chapter 4:01. In front of the ruins of the treasure house on the 100 Qi Peak. Senior Uncle Zhong, do you have any other opinions? Originally, Yu Haoran wanted to take advantage of Li Yin's willingness to give up the competition for the position of sect master and turn around to support Chu Zhongyu. He wanted to announce in public that Chu Zhongyu would officially take over Zhao Ji and become the new sect master of the 100 Qi Gate. He wanted to settle the matter of the sect master completely. However, he did not expect Zhong Faken's rebuke to directly interrupt his plan. Although he was very dissatisfied, considering that Zhong Faken was not only the deputy sect master, but also a martial royal expert, he and Lai Yin would need the help of his eldest senior brother after he became the sect master. Therefore, Yu Haoran suppressed the anger in his heart and asked pleasantly, Yu Haoran, who will become the new sect master of the 100 Qi Gate, is not up to you. Yu Haoran, nor is it up to us peak masters to decide. Because according to the rules of the 100 Chi Gate, only the senior statesman's peak can decide who the new sect master is, and at least 7 elders have to agree. Therefore, if you want Chu Zhongyu to become the new sect master of the 100 Chi Gate, I'm afraid you need to go to the senior statesman's peak and ask the 13 elders. When she mentioned the 13 elders, Zhong Fakin saw a pile of flesh and blood not far away and immediately changed her words. No, go ask the 12 elders for their opinions. Originally, he had been amiable to Zhong Fakin because he did not want to offend her too much. He wanted to get her support so that she and Lai Yin could help his eldest senior brother take control of the 100 Chi Gate as soon as possible. However, in order to prevent Chu Zhongyu from becoming the sect master, or rather, Zhong Fakin was still unwilling to give up and wanted to become the sect master, she planned to unite the elders of the senior statesman's peak to deal with him. This was unacceptable to Yu Haoran, and it also crossed his bottom line. Is that so? Therefore, Yu Haoran put away his amiable attitude and asked coldly. Then, he turned his head and shouted at Black Bear, who was at the back of the mountain. Black Bear, give me 1 minute to kill all the people at the back of the mountain and come to see me. Roar. Sensing the anger contained in Yu Haoran's commanding tone, the black bear roared. Then, it swung its 2 gigantic paws as if it was beating a drum. In a short 50 seconds, it slapped the entire back mountain of 100 feet peak. Then, it used another 5 seconds to scan the back of the mountain with its divine telekinesis. After making sure that nothing was left behind, it used 3 seconds to arrive in front of Yu Haoran. Black Bear, do you see that mountain? Yu Haoran asked as he pointed at a majestic mountain in the depths of the sect. I see it. He Xiong replied with a nod. Go and invite the 12 people with the highest cultivation on that mountain peak here. Yu Haoran ordered. Yes. The black bear acknowledged the order and was about to soar into the sky when it suddenly thought of a question. It stroked the bear's head and asked, Master, what if someone is unwilling to come? Same as him, Yu Haoran said as he pointed at the pile of flesh not far away. Okay. He Xiong roared excitedly and soared into the sky with a murderous intent. But at this moment, Gao Wanping also soared into the sky and left behind a message. Martial Nephew Yu, I'll accompany Brother Divine Beast to the senior statesman's peak. Yu Haoran knew very well why Gao Wanping wanted to go to the senior statesman's peak, so he neither asked nor stopped him. But at this moment, Zhong Fakin looked at Yu Haoran with a pale face. Although he knew that Yu Haoran was audacious and reckless, the senior statesman's peak was the real foundation of the 100 Chi Gate in this area. It was the real trump card of the 100 Chi Gate that could deter the affiliated sects and forces. Originally, he thought that Yu Haoran would more or less be afraid of the elders of the senior statesman's peak and would give them some face. However, Zhong Fakin never expected that Yu Haoran would directly send the mountain guardian divine beast, the black bear, to invite the elders. Based on the black bear's ruthlessness, the spoiled elders of the senior statesman's peak would probably not listen obediently. The result was obvious. At this moment, although Zhong Fakin was unwilling to give up on the challenge to the Gate Master's throne, he could only choose to compromise like Lai Yin in the face of Yu Haoran's tyranny and viciousness, and wait for the opportunity to rise again. Unfortunately, the opponent he faced this time was Yu Haoran, a ruthless figure that didn't play by the rules at all and did as he pleased. Using the senior statesman's peak to suppress him had completely touched Yu Haoran's bottom line. Even if Chu Zhongyu was about to take over the Gate Master's position, Yu Haoran wouldn't touch him for the time being. But what about afterward? Based on Yu Haoran's vengeful personality, he would definitely settle the score after the autumn. It didn't take long for the 12 elders of the senior statesman's peak to arrive. Apart from the 7 elders who were still in good spirits, the other 5 elders were covered in dirt. Greetings, elders! Compared to Lian's respectful attitude, Yu Haoran's attitude toward the 12 elders was very casual. However, in the face of Yu Haoran's casual greeting, the 12 elders did not dare to show the slightest disrespect. Elders, I didn't want to trouble you at first, But our Vice Gate Master Zhong said that the appointment of the new Gate Master of the 100 Qi Gate must be approved by the 12 elders. If I, Yu Haoran, dared to decide the new Gate Master's candidate on my own, it would not comply with the sect's rules. Afterward, the 12 elders would join forces to take revenge on me. Yu Haoran lied without blushing or his heart beating wildly. 12 elders, I wonder if what Vice Gate Master Zhong said was true? Yu Haoran, when did I say that the 12 elders would join forces to take revenge on you? Zhong Fakin jumped up and retorted when she heard Yu Haoran distorting the truth and slandering her. As the Vice Gate Master of the 100 Qi Gate, who is second only to one person and above millions of people, are you, Zhong Fakin, a villain who dares to speak but doesn't dare to admit it? Since he dared to lie in front of everyone, he wasn't afraid that someone would expose him. Therefore, in the face of Zhong Fakin's rebuttal, Yu Haoran sneered sarcastically. Zhong, Sun Lianping, the previous peak master of the Senior Statesman's Peak and the strongest of the Senior Statesman's Peak, suddenly roared. The death match between the Clear Cloud Peak and the 100 Qi Peak could be said to be the most sensational event in the 100 Qi Gate for hundreds of years. As the 12 elders who truly controlled the 100 Qi Gate, how could they not pay attention to it? Therefore, from Yu Haoran's appearance to Zhao Ji's betrayal of the sect, they had been watching. However, when they were killing Zhao Haoqing, for some unknown reason, a powerful divine sense suddenly appeared on 100 Feet Peak, directly cutting off their divine senses from watching the factional life and death battle, so they didn't know what was going to happen on 100 Feet Peak. However, although they didn't know what happened next on 100 Qi Peak, the process of a death match let the 12 elders know how terrifying Yu Haoran's methods were and how ruthless his vengeful nature was. In order to prevent Chu Zhongyu from becoming the new sect master of the 100 Qi Gate so that she could ascend the throne, Zhong Fakin had dragged down the remaining 12 elders of the Senior Statesman's Group. How could Sun Lianping not be angry? Our Senior Statesman's Group was established only to provide a place for the elders who have served the sect all their lives to rest and recuperate. We only have the right to advise on the sect's affairs, but not the right to make decisions. Chapter 402 100 Qi Peak, in front of the ruins of the treasury. Sun Bianping scolded loudly while secretly observing Yu Haoran's expression. Only when Yu Haoran nodded slightly did he secretly heave a sigh of relief. However, thinking of Zhong Fakin's sinister intentions, a mere scolding was not enough to quell the anger in his heart. Therefore, after Sun Lianping excused himself from Yu Haoran and Chu Zhongyu, the 12 elders gathered together and used their divine senses for a short meeting. In the end, except for an elder with the surname Kong, who looked a little unhappy, the other 11 elders nodded firmly in agreement. Yu Haoran, Chu Zhongyu. After the 12 elders finished their discussion, Sun Lianping came in front of Yu Haoran and Chu Zhongyu and said with a serious expression, Elder Sun, please speak. Sun Lianping asked for his instructions for everything, including Chu Zhongyu, which meant that he and the other 10 elders who were on the same side as him had all tacitly agreed that Chu Zhongyu was the new gate leader. Therefore, Yu Haoran quietly tugged on Chu Zhongyu's sleeve, indicating that he should talk to Sun Lianping. According to the care that the ancestors of the gate have for the elders who have contributed their lives, it is stipulated that anyone who dares to slander, frame, or spread rumors behind our backs and bring harm to the elders will be dealt with by the elders. No one has the right to question or intervene. Therefore, in the face of Zhong Fakin's slander and framing of the elders, after our discussion, the 11 elders have agreed to remove Zhong Fakin from the position of deputy gate leader. Under normal circumstances, after announcing the result of Zhong Fakin's punishment, Sun Lianping still needed to ask for the gate leader's opinion. However, Chu Zhongyu was not the gate leader of the 100 Qi Gate yet, so he did not know whether his request was correct or not, nor did he know how to address Chu Zhongyu. Second elder, although the peak master recommended me and the elders present did not object, the gate leader's inauguration ceremony has not been officially held yet. Zhongyu is only an ordinary disciple of the Qingyun peak. Chu Zhongyu, who had readjusted his attitude, quickly displayed his tactful ability and means as the eldest senior brother of Clear Cloud Peak. Therefore, his attitude was humble and his tone was steady as he replied. Therefore, the second elder and the 11 elders can decide on any punishment for vice sect leader Zhong. I, Chu Zhongyu, will not have any objections. Chu Zhongyu's reply made most of the peak masters and the 11 elders very satisfied. Only Yu Haoren was a little disappointed. Many people believed that the reason why the strength of the 100 Qi Gate had not improved over the past few decades was due to the intense competition between the sections. However, Yu Haoren knew that this was only on the surface. As one of the 36 second-rate sect masters of the profound Sky Continent, the other 35 second-rate sect had their own conflicts. However, none of the conflict between the sects were as intense as the one in the 100 Qi Gate. It was so intense that it seriously affected the strength and status of the sect. Yu Haoren knew that the real reason for the intense conflict between the sects was not only because the second gate leader was unable to suppress the powerful and ambitious peak masters, but also because of the elders who were unwilling to give up their power. Even though they had the highest cultivation and strength, they couldn't enjoy the power and authority that came with it. Therefore, these founding elders supported and instigated in secret, further intensifying the intensity and cruelty of the factional battles to ensure that they had absolute control over the sect. Therefore, in order to quell the conflict between the sects and the 100 Qi Gate, the first thing to do was to deprive the senior statesman peak of its absolute control. Then, find a way to completely isolate these elders so that they could participate less or not at all in the affairs of the sect. However, judging from Chu Zhongyu's reaction just now, he was like most of the peak masters in the sect. He faced the senior statesman peak with respect and fear. Although he was disappointed, Yu Haoren did not say anything. This was because he had forcefully pushed his first senior brother, who had just broken through to Martial King, to the position of gate leader for his own selfish reasons. As a result, Yu Haoren knew that he had both a responsibility and an obligation to help his first senior brother deal with the hidden problems that were stirring up the conflict between the sections. Sun Lianping nodded in satisfaction when he saw that Chu Zhongyu had the same attitude as all the other peak masters who had secretly allied with him in the past. He then announced to the 30 or so peak masters, "Since that's the case, I will represent the senior statesman peak and the 100 Qi Gate to officially announce that Zhong Fakin has been stripped of his position as vice gate leader. He has been stripped of all the benefits and authority that belongs to a vice gate leader." Zhong Fakin directly fell to the ground with a pale face when he heard Sun Lianping's announcement. He simply could not understand why the 12 senior statesmen, who clearly had absolute control over the sect, were so afraid of Yu Haoren that they had no choice but to remove him from his position as vice gate leader to appease Yu Haoren's anger. Unfortunately, no one at the scene came to answer him. This was because after announcing his punishment, Yu Haoren had called the 12 senior statesmen and the 33 peak masters to discuss Chu Zhongyu's appointment as gate leader. She looked at the peak masters of the various factions who had usually ignored her but were now trying to curry favor with Yu Haoren. Zhong Fakin finally understood something when she saw the senior statesmen, who were usually arrogant and rude and had never looked her in the eye, fawning over Yu Haoren. Status and authority were all empty. The only thing that could truly decide one's fate was the fist in one's hand. In the past, she had overly complicated the conflict between the sects and the competition for the position of gate leader. She had thought that if she wanted to win the position of gate leader, she would need to raise the overall strength of her faction as well as gain the support of many people. However, judging from Yu Haoren's performance today, if she was now a martial sage, even if she did not take the initiative to compete for the position of gate leader, the senior statesmen and peak masters would shamelessly beg her to be gate leader. Zhong Fakin's dejected mood was swept away after she had thought it through. Then, he stood up, straightened his clothes, and turned to leave 100 Feet Peak. A hint of hesitation flashed across Yu Haoren's eyes as he watched Zhong Fakin, who had regained her spirits. Zhong Fakin was a peerless genius with outstanding talent and potential who had only been delayed by the conflict between the factions. As long as she could resolve the knot in her heart, her mental state cultivation would soar and her great potential would be stimulated. Based on Zhong Fakin's current mental state cultivation, she would probably be able to successfully comprehend the power of laws and become a martial sage in a few years' time. Based on Zhong Fakin's character, she would definitely return to the sect on the day she broke through to the martial sage level. Should I send Black Bear to get rid of Zhong Fakin in advance to prevent her from affecting eldest senior brother's position as gate leader in the future? However, after careful consideration, Yu Haoran finally gave up on this idea. How could a genius with outstanding talent and potential raise her cultivation and power faster? The guidance of a famous teacher, sufficient cultivation resources, and pills to raise one's cultivation and power could only be considered as a general means of support. In order to determine whether a genius would be able to advance quickly, besides the means of support, she would need enough pressure to continuously stimulate her potential. Zhong Fakin's change and departure was a good thing for both Chu Zhongyu and himself. Chapter 403. 100 Chi Gate, 100 Feet Peak, the summit. Sitting cross-legged on a green rock, Yu Haoran's eyes were closed and his breath was long. He seemed to be in a state of meditation. However, the rich spiritual chi around him was still, indicating that he was not cultivating. After sitting cross-legged for nearly half an hour, Yu Haoran's consciousness suddenly asked, "Thaling, how is it?" The situation is not optimistic. After a few more minutes, Thaling in the sea of consciousness replied. However, the tone of the reply was very serious. "What's wrong?" Yu Haoran asked nervously. "The power of the poison is too strong, causing the weapon spirit of the sky-measuring ruler to have to cut off all its senses to prevent the poison from entering the spirit." Yu Haoran, the secret method of cutting off all senses is called the secret method of returning breath. Unless it can no longer feel the threat of the poison, it will wake up on its own. Otherwise, even if I use all the power of the spirit, I'm afraid it will be difficult to wake it up. After explaining to this point, Thaling withdrew all the divine thoughts that had entered the sky-measuring ruler and asked in a slightly urgent tone. "Therefore, you can't continue to be entangled by the trifles of the sect. You must find a way to leave 100 Feet Peak immediately and improve your cultivation through experience as soon as possible. Strive to break through the martial arts grandmaster realm and condense the spirit in the shortest time possible. Because through my observation just now, I found that the poison in the weapon spirit of the sky-measuring ruler is a kind of poison that can absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to grow on its own." Hearing the information that Thaling inadvertently revealed, Yu Haoran vaguely remembered that in his previous life, he had heard of a kind of poison. Its power was average at the beginning, but as it lurked for a long time, its power grew stronger. In the end, it could directly devour the soul and spirit of the poisoned person, thus becoming a new species that contained a huge poison. However, the memory of that kind of poison was only occasionally heard of at some point in time. The impression was not very deep, so it was difficult for him to recall it in a short time. "Thaling, even if you didn't mention it, I was planning to leave the sect in the next 1 or 2 days." Shaking his head, Yu Haoran temporarily suppressed the memories of the poison and responded to Thaling's suggestion. "After all, I still have to help Master find the plant insect so that I can remove the 7 worms and 7 flowers powder in his body." "That's great." He would be leaving the sect in a day or 2. Yu Haoran's reply told Thaling that he didn't need to say anything more. After that, Yu Haoran took out 2 level 5 first-grade spirit stones from his storage ring and held them tightly in his hand. Then, with the help of the rich spiritual energy at the top of the mountain, he planned to continue his cultivation breakthrough. Due to the tempering in the depths of the mountain range, his successive breakthroughs to the martial master realm had already been completely consolidated. The experience of the faction's life and death battle had also allowed him to accumulate some comprehension of the realm. He would have to leave the sect in a day or two. If he wanted to focus on breaking through in the sect, he probably wouldn't have such a good opportunity. Therefore, Yuhauran planned to use up the accumulation of his realm in advance and increase his cultivation by a small realm. The abundant spiritual energy from the level 5 first grade spirit stones and the rich spiritual energy of heaven and earth at the top of the 100-feet peak allowed his cultivation to quickly increase. In less than half an hour, Yuhauran already felt the bottleneck of the high stage of the 5th grade martial master. Because it was only a small breakthrough in a small realm, with the help of the Yuan Li and abundant spiritual energy in his Dantian, he broke through the bottleneck of the realm in just the first attempt and smoothly entered the high stage of the 5th grade martial master. After feeling that the accumulation of his realm hadn't been completely used up, Yuhauran planned to increase his cultivation to the peak of the 5th grade martial master in one go. Then, with the help of pills, he would break through to the 6th grade martial master. However, at that moment, 5th senior brother Huang Zonghua suddenly arrived at the top of the mountain. 5th senior brother, why are you here? Seeing Huang Zonghua suddenly arrive at the top of the 100-feet peak, Yuhauran asked in confusion. A day ago, considering the current situation of the 100-Chi Gate, as well as Chu Zhongyu's own situation, the 12 founding elders and the 33 peak masters discussed and decided that Chu Zhongyu would temporarily take over the position of the gate master of the 100-Chi Gate. However, they wouldn't hold an inauguration ceremony in the near future. Firstly, it was because Chu Zhongyu's cultivation was too low. If they held an inauguration ceremony now, it would make it seem as if the 100-Chi Gate didn't have anyone capable, and it would also attract the ridicule of the other sections. Secondly, because the 100-Chi Gate had been fighting intensely for the past few decades, it had caused the sect to lose too much strength. They didn't want the new gate master to be too weak, which would attract the disloyalty of the affiliated sects and powers. They also didn't want to attract the ambitions of other sects of the same level to loot a burning house. Now, with Chu Zhongyu taking over the position of gate master, it was the busiest time. All of the disciples of the Clear Cloud faction, with the exception of Yuhauran, even Gongsun Yuding, who had just started cultivating and was only a second-grade martial disciple, was helping Chu Zhongyu take care of the sect's affairs. Why would Huang Zonghua, who was Chu Zhongyu's right-hand man, come to visit him sometimes? Looking at Yuhauran, who was leisurely sitting cross-legged on the bluestone, Huang Zonghua thought about how busy he had been the entire day and complained unhappily. "Nine junior brother, what should I say about you? You were the one who recommended eldest senior brother to take the position of gate master. You were also the one who told eldest senior brother to hold the power tightly. Now, in order to help eldest senior brother smoothly take control of the sect in a short period of time, the 10 of us are so busy that we're dizzy. Then, as the main force, what about you? All right, cut the crap. Just tell me, why are you looking for me?" Ignoring Huang Zonghua's complaints, Yuhauran, who was eager to continue breaking through, said with a slightly impatient tone. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't want to help eldest senior brother familiarize himself with and control the sect as soon as possible, but every time he appeared in front of the sect's higher-ups, those people would tremble in fear and didn't dare to speak at all. This was why he was bored and wanted to ask Thaling to further investigate the situation of the heaven-measuring ruler's spirit so that he could understand the properties of the giant poison and prepare to detoxify it in advance. Ninth junior brother, trouble has come knocking. Seeing a flash of impatience on Yuhauran's face just now, Huang Zonghua knew that his ninth junior brother had something urgent to deal with and didn't want to listen to his complaints, so he directly explained the reason for his visit. "What trouble?" Yuhauran asked. The He clan, one of the affiliated forces of our 100-Chi Gate, was suddenly exterminated 5 days ago. Only the twin sisters of the He clan's patriarch were spared because they went out for training. Now, the sisters have come to our 100-Chi Gate, hoping that we can send masters to investigate the cause of the extermination of the He clan and help them take revenge. Huang Zonghua briefly introduced the trouble that he had encountered now. However, when he mentioned the twin sisters of the He clan, Huang Zhonghua's expression was a little strange, but Yu Haoran, who was thinking about something, didn't notice it. Fifth senior brother, although the inauguration ceremony hasn't been held yet, according to the agreement reached by me, the 12 elders, and the 33 peak masters, the first senior brother has all the rights that a sect leader should have. In that case, why don't you arrange masters from the law enforcement peak or transfer masters from different factions to investigate? Yu Haoran frowned and questioned. This. In the face of Yu Haoran's questioning, Huang Zhonghua looked like he wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Say it. Yu Haoran's face darkened and he roared. After receiving the He sisters' request for help, the first senior brother immediately went to the peak master of the law enforcement peak and asked him to send masters to investigate. But the peak master said that all the masters of the law enforcement peak were helping junior brother to investigate the disciples of the 100 Chi Gate, so he couldn't spare anyone for the time being. Huang Zhonghua, who was startled by Yu Haoran's roar, hurriedly explained the predicament that Chu Zhongyu was in. Chapter 404. 100 Chi Peak. After hearing Huang Zhonghua's explanation, Yu Haoran couldn't help but sneer. Humph, you want to play along with me, Yu Haoran, right? Originally, I wanted to transform into a large Power King Kong ape and bring Black Bear to visit a few disobedient sects and family powers. I wanted to show eldest senior brother who is in charge of the 100 Chi Gate. As he sneered, Yu Haoran stood up and muttered to himself. From the looks of it, after dealing with the He clan's trouble, the first place I will go after transforming into a large Power King Kong ape is probably the few factions of our sect. Hearing Yu Haoran gnashing his teeth as he muttered to himself, Huang Zhonghua was immediately given a fright. Ever since Yu Haoran joined the 100 Chi Gate and joined the Clear Cloud Peak, obtaining the secret technique to transform into a strange beast, every time he transformed, it would bring about a bloody massacre. Now, eldest senior brother had finally used his personal charm and methods to temporarily obtain the support of the various peak masters, as well as the 12 elders of the Elder Peak. If the 9th junior brother were to cause trouble like this, then the eldest senior brother's meticulously planned plan would fail, so Huang Zhonghua hurriedly advised. 9th junior brother, don't be rash. According to my judgment, those peak systems are indeed busy and temporarily can't spare any experts above the Martial King realm. As for the extermination of the He clan, I'm afraid that even the experts of the Martial Ancestor realm and the Martial Master realm would be useless. Black Bear, come here. Coldly looking at Huang Zhonghua, Yu Haoran did not say anything, and only called out to the Black Bear that was left behind in the back mountain. 9th junior brother, what exactly do you mean? Seeing that Yu Haoran did not give him a definite answer, Huang Zhonghua asked anxiously. 5th senior brother, go and inform the He clan's sisters to wait for me at the bottom of the trial peak. Black Bear and I will accompany them to investigate the reason why the He clan was annihilated. When the Black Bear arrived at the top of the mountain and consciously grew in size, Yu Haoran jumped onto the Black Bear's back and instructed Huang Zhonghua. Sure, Huang Zhonghua didn't have to worry about Yu Haoran's safety when he went out with the Black Bear that had reached the peak of the 8th rank of the 5th step. But until now, he still hadn't answered Huang Zhonghua whether he had given up on finding trouble with those factions. So Huang Zhonghua continued to ask, 9th junior brother, what do you plan to do with those factions in the sect? Yu Haoran replied as he gestured for the Black Bear to leave the peak. 5th senior brother, go back and tell eldest senior brother that mercy does not lead troops and righteousness does not raise wealth. If he wants to use his conciliatory means to control the sect and use a balanced method to quell the conflict between the factions, I will not object. But if you encounter any difficulties in the future, don't come looking for me and don't expect me to help you. When he heard Yu Haoran's warning before he left, Huang Zhonghua couldn't help but freeze in place. This was because he could not understand why his 9th junior brother, who could clearly be the enemy of everyone in the world for the safety of his senior brother, would say such heartless words. Yu Haoran, what's the matter with you? Not only did Huang Zonghua not understand Yu Haoran's parting words, but even Thaling was also quite confused. Thaling was the person who understood the deep relationship between Yu Haoran and the senior brothers of the Qingyun faction the best. Just because he was seriously injured by a sneak attack, Yu Haoran dared to go to the law enforcement peak alone to avenge Chu Zhongyu. After emptying the entire treasury of the law enforcement peak, in order to improve the cultivation and strength of his senior brothers, he was willing to give them 1/3 of the resources and treasures. In order to let Chu Zhongyu get better training, he sacrificed a lot of benefits to help him sit on the throne of the 100 Qi Gate. With such deep feelings and such a huge sacrifice, how could Yu Haoran suddenly become so heartless? Thaling, as the saying goes, wealth and silk move people's hearts, but power and influence sway people's will. The superior sense of superiority, the desire to control the fate of millions of people, has changed Senior Brother. At the same time, he has become blindly confident. I'm afraid that the original respect he had for me is now gone. Riding on the black bear, Yu Haoran explained with an indifferent expression. Yu Haoran, in this case, not only did you not help Chu Zhongyu by forcing him to be the leader of the 100 Qi Gate, but you also harmed him. Not only did you cause him to become arrogant and ignorant, but you also hurt the deep feelings between you. Hearing Yu Haoran's indifferent explanation, Thaling was deeply surprised and could not help but complain. After all, the reason why Yu Haoran did his best to help the senior brothers of the Qingyun faction, in addition to the influence of the feelings of his previous life, was that he wanted to cultivate some helpers who could accompany him to conquer the world in the future. No. In the face of Thaling's complaints, Yu Haoran shook his head. Actually, when I decided to force Senior Brother to be the leader of the 100 Qi Gate, I already expected that his mentality would change, and it would also affect the deep feelings between us. After all, the superior sense of superiority, the desire to control the fate of millions of people, is too tempting for a 30-year-old young man who has never experienced great ups and downs. It can easily cause his mentality to become unbalanced. Then why did you still do this? Since he knew that it would hurt each other's feelings, why did he continue to do so? Yu Haoran's explanation just now made Thaling even more confused. Thaling, as the saying goes, character determines fate. Although Senior Brother's talent and potential are not bad, the cultivation method of training in seclusion does not suit him, and the experience of adventuring is even more unsuitable for him. The only thing that can truly bring out his character and potential is the tempering of a high position and the oppression of a cruel environment. Only then can he truly stimulate his own potential and finally step into the peak of his martial arts through this method. And the special geographical location and environment of the 100 Qi Gate means that we are destined not to stay here for long. In the future, we will definitely go to a wider world to explore. Therefore, according to my plan, I will not let Senior Brother sit in the position of the leader of the 100 Qi Gate for too long. When his state of mind is more or less tempered, I will let him return to the position of the chief disciple of the Qingyun Peak, and then lead the Qingyun faction to completely leave the 100 Qi Gate. At this point, Yu Haoran could not help but laugh bitterly. The only thing I didn't expect was that the cultivation of Grand Senior Brother's mental state was so low. In just a short day, his mind had already been corroded by the temptation of a high position, causing him to have arrogant thoughts that he thought himself infallible. Then what do you plan to do next? After hearing Yu Haoran's more detailed explanation, while Thaling sighed at Yu Haoran's caution, he also wanted to know his next step. Don't care, don't ask. Reaching out to pat the black bear, indicating for it to speed up, Yu Haoran gave his plan. When Senior Brother is at the end of his rope and truly realizes his mistakes, then it will be time for me to truly correct all of this. At the bottom of the training peak, Gong Sun Yiming, who was responsible for guiding the He clan sisters, secretly glanced at the sisters from the corner of his eyes from time to time. If it was purely a comparison of appearance, although the He clan's pair of beautiful sisters were very outstanding, they were still slightly inferior to the younger sister, Gong Sun Yuding. Chapter 405. 100 Chi Gate at the foot of the training peak. Gong Sun Yiming constantly paid attention to the He clan's beautiful sisters, not because he was attracted to their similar looks and devilish figures, but because he was worried that these beautiful sisters would pose a threat to his younger sister Gong Sun Yuding's future happiness. This was because when they left Qingyun Peak, fifth senior brother had already said that the investigation of the He clan's extermination and the mission of avenging them had been handed over to ninth senior brother Yu Haoren. The journey from the 100 Chi Gate to the He clan's residence was more than 2,000 miles, so a round trip would be more than 4,000 miles. If the investigation of the He clan's extermination and the time of avenging the He clan were included, it would take at least 3 or 4 days. Gong Sun Yiming was worried that such a long time would cause Yu Haoren's heart to be moved by the 3 of them alone and facing the beautiful sisters. Although it was said that the more outstanding a man was, the more women there would be around him, Gong Sun Yiming, as the biological brother of the same father and mother, didn't want his younger sister to suffer, especially in the aspect of fighting for favor. Senior brother Gong Sun, I wonder what the cultivation level of the 9th junior brother that the new sect master mentioned is like. Among the He sisters, the older sister He Yu had a cold temperament and didn't like to talk. The younger sister, He Ting, had a fiery temperament. Not only did she like to talk, but she also liked to inquire about everything. Just now, it was the younger sister, He Ting, who asked the question. If your He clan has been paying attention to the major events that have happened in our 100 Chi Gate in the past few months, then the sect master just mentioned the 9th junior brother. I'm sure you know very well. Although he didn't want to praise Yu Haoren too much, so as not to arouse the ill intentions of the sisters, he thought that they would see Yu Haoren's methods sooner or later, so he gave them a slight reminder. Senior Marshal Brother Gong Sun, 3 months ago, we sisters went out to train with an elder in the family. Not to mention learning about what happened at the 100 Chi Gate, we didn't even know that our He clan had been exterminated until we returned to the family. Seeing that Gong Sun Yiming didn't want to talk too much about Yu Haoren, his younger sister He Ting complained with an aggrieved expression. Actually, the reason why He Ting kept asking about Chu Zhongyu's 9th junior brother was not because she had any special thoughts. Instead, it was because she wanted to know the cultivation level of the 9th junior brother appointed by the new sect leader. She wanted to know if he had the strength to help them take revenge. After all, the He clan's Jadeite Mountain Villa was over 2,000 li away from the 100 Chi Gate. With their cultivation that had just broken through to the Martial Master realm, a round trip would take at least a day and a half. Furthermore, they would have to pass through the territories of a sect and 3 family clans on the way. With the sisters' beauty and cultivation levels, this journey would be extremely dangerous. If the 9th junior brother sent by the new sect leader was too weak to help them take revenge, they didn't want to go through another hair-raising journey. The 9th junior brother recommended by the sect leader is Gong Sun Yiming's 9th senior martial brother. Perhaps it was because He Ting's grievances had moved Gong Sun Yiming's heart. Originally, he did not want to praise Yu Haoren too much, but now he changed his mind. If we were to ask who in the 100 Chi Gate is the most suitable person to avenge your clan's extermination, I'm afraid that my 9th senior martial brother is the most suitable candidate. Gong Sun Yiming's introduction didn't really put the He sisters at ease. He Ting wanted to ask more about Yu Haoren, but Gong Sun Yiming had already led them to the bottom of the training peak. 9th senior martial brother, you're here. Seeing the young man sitting on the back of the black bear, standing at the bottom of the training peak, Gong Sun Yiming was overjoyed and hurriedly went forward to greet him. Jumping down from the black bear's back, Yu Haoren smiled and comforted Gong Sun Yiming. Yiming, it's been hard on you. Hearing Yu Haoren's concern, Gong Sun Yiming hurriedly said politely, it's not hard at all. It's mainly the senior martial brothers who are busy. I'm just helping out. 9th senior martial brother, let me introduce you. After being polite, Gong Sun Yiming thought of Yu Haoren's mission this time and hurriedly introduced him to the He sisters behind him. My 2 junior martial sisters. This is my 9th senior martial brother, Yu Haoren, who is recommended by the sect leader. Then, he pointed at the He sisters and introduced them while carefully observing Yu Haoren's reaction. This junior martial sister with a cold temperament is the elder sister, He Yu. The other one with a warm temperament is the younger sister, He Ting. Greetings to you, Shi Xiao. Greetings to you, Shi Xiao. Although He Yu and He Ting were very disappointed when they first met, considering that Yu Haoran was the new sect leader's junior martial brother, the two of them didn't dare to slight him in the slightest. Nodding lightly, Yu Haoran turned around and instructed Gong Sun Yiming. Greetings to the two junior martial sisters. Seeing that Yu Haoran didn't show the slightest surprise, Gong Sun Yiming couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Junior martial brother Gong Sun, go back and pass a message to senior martial brother for me. Ninth senior martial brother, please speak. Gong Sun Yiming hurriedly straightened his attitude and listened carefully. Don't let Yu Ting participate in the sect's messy affairs. Her main task now is to seize the time to cultivate. Don't let down the potential she has. Ninth senior martial brother, I will remember. So it turned out that he was concerned about his younger sister. Gong Sun Yiming was overjoyed and hurriedly nodded. In addition, go back and tell Yu Ting that after I'm done with the He clan's affairs and return to Qingyun Peak, I will definitely inspect her cultivation. If her cultivation progress doesn't satisfy me, then I will throw her into the depths of the mountains and let her cultivate by killing strange beasts. Ninth senior martial brother, don't worry. I will supervise Yu Ting's cultivation. Gong Sun Yiming nodded heavily and patted his chest as he promised. All right, you can go back. Waving his hand, Yu Haoran indicated that Gong Sun Yiming could leave. Ninth senior martial brother, take care. Gong Sun Yiming turned around and glanced at the black bear. He executed his movement technique and headed straight for Qingyun Peak. Junior martial sisters, let's talk as we walk. After Gong Sun Yiming left, Yu Haoran patted the black bear's leg, indicating that it should lead the way. He then instructed the He sisters. Glancing at each other, He Yu and He Ting both saw the disappointment in each other's eyes. They wanted to tell Yu Haoran that he was merely a young disciple of the 100 Feet sect. At most, he would only be a martial master. He wouldn't be stronger than them. They wanted to tell him that he wasn't going to the Jadeite Mountain Villa to investigate the extermination of the He clan. Instead, he was going there to throw his life away. However, when they thought about Gong Sun Yiming's attitude towards Yu Haoran, they realized that he respected him from the bottom of his heart. Considering that Yu Haoran was personally recommended by the new gate master, the two sisters could only suppress their disappointment and quickly follow Yu Haoran's footsteps. Junior martial sister He Ting, do you know when exactly the He clan was exterminated? Yu Haoran had long noticed the He sisters' actions of deliberately lagging behind. He also knew that they were dissatisfied with sending such a young disciple to investigate the He clan's extermination. However, Yu Haoran did not prove his strength in front of them, nor did he feel the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. Right now, he only wanted to understand some general information about the He clan's extermination before arriving at the Jadeite Mountain Villa, so that he could find some clues. Chapter 406. Although she wasn't too satisfied with the fact that Yu Haoran, a young disciple, was in charge of investigating the He clan's extermination, He Ting, who had always understood the big picture, still explained everything she knew in detail. Junior He Ting, have you examined the wounds of the deceased? Were they caused by ordinary weapons, or were they killed by magic tools that contain the power of the soul? Nodding his head, Yu Haoran continued to ask the second question. There were extremely sharp ordinary weapons, as well as magic tools that contain the power of different attributes. He Ting replied, were all the clan's treasures lost? Hearing Yu Haoran's third question, He Ting was silent for a moment, then opened her mouth to speak. Speaking of which, it's strange. No matter if it's the gold, silver, and jewels in the ordinary accounting room, or the spirit stones, pills, and secret manuals in the treasury, none of them were lost. 1360 people were all killed. This meant that the other party either had an irreconcilable hatred with the He clan, or the He clan knew a secret that they shouldn't have known. The wounds of the deceased included ordinary weapons, as well as magic tools that contained the power of the soul. This meant that the opponent who exterminated the He clan wasn't a single person, but a force with many people. After exterminating the He clan, nothing was lost. This meant that the other party was disciplined and knew when to advance and retreat. And for such a force, it was impossible for an ordinary sect or clan to do so. Only those armies that paid attention to discipline and strict rules, as well as bandits that pursued coming and going like the wind, could do so. As one of the 36 second-rate sects in the profound sky continent, the 100 Gate sphere of influence had a few kingdoms that possessed armies. But with the strength of those kingdoms, it was probably not enough to exterminate the entire He clan. Thinking about it, it could only be done by bandits that came and went like the wind, whose strength was unknown. As for which group of bandits it would probably need to be carefully observed and found at the scene of the He clan's extermination. Thinking of this, Yuhauran realized that if they were to rely on walking, it would probably take 2 days and 1 night to reach the Jadeite mountain villa where the He clan was exterminated. Therefore, Yuhauran stopped his footsteps and shouted at the black bear that was not far from them. "Black bear, get bigger! Junior sisters, if you don't mind, we can ride on this black bear together. That way, we can arrive at the Jadeite mountain villa a day earlier." Pointing at the black bear that had doubled in size, Yuhauran took the initiative to invite it. Looking at the black bear's huge body and thick fur, Yu and He Ting were very tempted. However, when they thought of sitting together with Yuhauran, a man whom they were not familiar with, the two of them suddenly felt very uncomfortable. Moreover, judging from how the black bear obeyed Yuhauran's orders, the two of them suspected that the black bear was Yuhauran's pet beast. If Yuhauran were to touch them while they were on the back of the black bear, they could only suffer in silence, unable to voice out their bitterness. If the two junior sisters find it inconvenient, you can use your movement techniques to follow me. Seeing the hesitation that flashed across Yu and He Ting's faces, Yuhauran knew what they were worried about. In this regard, although Yuhauran wasn't angry, he wouldn't continue to show his warm face to their cold buttocks. Of course, he wouldn't be so foolish as to let the beauties ride on the black bear while he used his movement techniques to follow them. Reaching out to pat the black bear's big feet, Yuhauran reminded them with a smile. "Don't judge this black bear by its ordinary strength. It's quite fast." Then, he jumped onto the bear's back, intending to signal the black bear to hurry on. At this moment, the cold Yu also jumped lightly onto the black bear's back. However, she tried her best to sit on the edge of the black bear's back, maintaining a safe distance from Yuhauran. Seeing that her sister had already jumped onto the bear, He Ting wasn't worried anymore. She also jumped onto the black bear's back and tried her best to sit on the edge of the black bear's back, just like Yu. Yuhauran chose to turn a blind eye to this. He took out a 7th-tier, first-rank spiritual stone and used the spiritual chi within to consolidate his recent breakthrough. Although the black bear was a peak 5th-tier, 8th-tier Emperor Realm exotic beast, with a height of 58 meters, Yuhauran didn't want to expose the black bear's true strength too early. Thus, he limited its size to about 10 meters. With a height of about 10 meters, the area on the black bear's back was limited even if it was crawling forward. As a result, the distance between the three of them wasn't very far. In the beginning, Yu and He Ting watched Yuhauran anxiously, on guard against him taking advantage of them. However, after waiting for over half an hour, they realized that Yuhauran was already immersed in his cultivation and wasn't interested in the two sisters at all. Not being taken advantage of should have been a happy thing, but Yu and He Ting's expressions were ugly. Yuhauran didn't take advantage of her sisters, which meant that her sisters' looks were very ordinary and couldn't enter Yuhauran's eyes at all. This greatly hurt their proud self-esteem. After exchanging glances with each other, Yu and He Ting purposely moved closer to Yuhauran, hoping to arouse his interest with their feminine auras. Unfortunately, even when He Ting's jade-like feet touched Yuhauran, he did not react in the slightest, whether it was intentional or not. I'm afraid that the charm of us sisters is too high, and we're afraid that we won't be able to resist the temptation of beauty, so we've purposely sealed off our senses. Looking at the unresponsive Yuhauran, He Ting could not help but console herself. However, before He Ting could finish comforting herself, The originally unresponsive Yu Haoran suddenly opened his eyes, startling the He sisters who had been staring at him. At first, He Ting wanted to complain a little more. However, when she saw Yu Haoran's serious expression, she swallowed the words that were already at the tip of her tongue. Don't leave the black bear. After leaving behind this warning, Yu Haoran immediately used the 7 transformation of the flood dragon, using his origin energy to form a flood dragon about 10 meters long. Then he stepped on the flood dragon and flew directly into a dense forest about 100 meters away from the black bear. He Yu's and He Ting's hearts skipped a beat when they saw Yu Haoran, who looked like a dragon among men, standing on a dragon with an elegant demeanor. They looked at each other and realized that there was an indescribable admiration in each other's eyes. Yu Haoran, although the other party's strength isn't very strong, he is very fast and very vigilant. After Yu Haoran stepped on the flood dragon and rushed into the dense forest, the murderous aura that he had sensed earlier had completely disappeared. This made Yu Haoran feel somewhat displeased. Fortunately, just as Yu Haoran felt that something was wrong, Thowling used his divine consciousness to track the other party's whereabouts in time and explained why he had missed him. Just as you sensed a trace of killing intent from the other party had already left in advance. Thowling, it seems that I have been targeted. Yu Haoran sneered as he looked at the direction that the other party had escaped in. Yu Haoran, don't worry. I will use my divine consciousness to monitor any movement within a 10-mile radius. Next time, I will not let the other party escape. Thowling knew why Yu Haoran sneered and hurriedly promised. Sorry to trouble you. After thanking him, Yu Haoran stepped on the flood dragon and returned to the black bear's back. Yu Shixiang, what happened? Yu Haoran had just sat cross-legged on the black bear's back when Yu, who had a cold temperament, took the initiative to ask this question. He Ting, on the other hand, glared at her elder sister unwillingly before staring at Yu Haoran. Chapter 407. We've been targeted. Turning his head to look at the He sisters whose attitude had suddenly changed, Yu Haoran could naturally guess the reason for their change in attitude. Facing such a snobbish woman, it was quite impossible for him to have any good feelings, so his tone was very cold as he replied. Afterwards, he took out a 7th-level, first-rank spirit stone again and used it to recover the yuan li he had used to fly with the flood dragon. Seeing Yu Haoran immersed in cultivation again, Yu opened her small mouth, but in the end, she didn't say anything to disturb him. At this moment, she finally understood why Yu Haoran, who was about the same age as her and her sisters, was able to master the powerful martial skill that could increase one's flying speed. The reason was probably because Yu Haoran had been cultivating with all his might. Therefore, after being affected, Yu and He Ting looked at each other. They also took out a 10th-level, 7th-rank spirit stone from their sleeves and began to cultivate diligently like Yu Haoran. Although its size was limited to about 10 meters, the black bear's speed had always been around the 7th level, reaching a speed of about 500 to 600 miles per hour. 2.5 hours later, when they were less than 500 miles away from the Jadeite mountain villa where the He family had been wiped out, the enemy who had been hiding in the dark finally revealed himself again. However, this time, Yu Haoran didn't take the risk of attacking. Instead, he first let Thowling lock onto the enemy's aura in advance, then let the black bear maintain its original speed and hurry on. Waiting until the black bear arrived in front of stream, Yu Haoran patted its head, indicating that it should stop for the time being. My 2 junior sisters, although my pet's speed is very fast, its grade is very average. Continuously rushing for over 1,000 miles has consumed a lot of its physical strength and Yao energy. So, let's take a break for now and let it recover some of its physical strength and Yao energy. Jumping down from the black bear's back, Yu Haoran explained. After jumping down from the black bear's back, He Ting spread her arms and stretched. When she noticed that Yu Haoran was looking at her, she purposely puffed out her breasts and complained in a lazy manner. Although the black bear's fur is very thick, it's also very bumpy when running. Right now, I feel a little sore all over my back. Looking at He Ting's purposely puffed out breasts, Yu Haoran, who didn't have the slightest fluctuation in his heart, patted the black bear's back and instructed, "Go to the dense forest over there and look for food to replenish your energy." Awoo! The black bear, after understanding Yu Howren's intentions, it looked excited and then rushed towards the dense forest on the west side. Seeing that Yu Howren's gaze only swept past her twin peaks, He Ting was slightly disappointed. She then called out to He Yu, and the two of them walked towards the stream, intending to simply wash up. Fouling, those three people didn't become suspicious, did they? Just as the black bear rushed into the dense forest, Yu Howren hurriedly connected with Fouling in his sea of consciousness and asked nervously as he mobilized the Yuan power in his dantian. They didn't become suspicious at all. They're still hiding in the canopy. Fouling first indicated to Yu Howren to disperse the Yuan power that he had just mobilized, and then replied, "That's good. As long as the three people hiding in the dark didn't escape in time with the black bear's methods, as long as it rushed into the dense forest, those three people would be like fat meat on a chopping board. It could chop them up as it pleased." Not even 5 seconds after the black bear rushed into the dense forest, the sounds of fighting could be heard from the dense forest. However, the sounds of fighting quickly stopped. Soon after, the black bear that had just rushed into the dense forest walked out on its hind legs. On each of its paws, there was one or two men in black clothing. The black bear directly placed the three men in black in front of Yu Howren and explained, "Master, I only used my demonic energy to knock them out. I didn't hurt them." Not far from Yu Howren, the He sisters, who were using the stream to wash up, turned pale when they heard the black bears speak human language. In the Tianxian continent, only those exotic beasts with extraordinary talents and noble bloodlines could speak human language when they were around the 7th rank. For ordinary exotic beasts to do this, their rank had to be at least the 6th rank. This also meant that the black bear that they had been riding along the way was actually a 6th rank exotic beast at the King Realm. Thinking of how the sisters had looked down on the black bear along the way, it would be strange if they didn't feel fear in their hearts. Looking at the three men in black in front of him, Yu Howren mobilized his Yuan power and used a special acupoint sealing secret technique to directly seal their Yuan power and soul. Then his left hand pointed at the stream not far away, and a stream of water rushed directly to the face of the man in black on the left. Cough! Due to the strong impact of the water stream, a lot of the stream water flowed directly into the mouth of the man in black. This caused the man in black, who had just woken up, to cough a few times uncontrollably. "Speak." After the man in black calmed down, Yu Howren asked, "Who are you? Why do you want to capture me?" As if he didn't hear Yu Howren's question, the man in black pretended to be panic-stricken and shouted, "Enough!" Mobilizing his Yuan power to his finger, Yu Howren directly used it to hit the left side of the man in black's chest, causing him to groan in pain. "You've been following us for more than 200 miles. Tell me, why do I want to capture you?" After the other party's pain subsided, Yu Howren asked with a smile. "Oomph." Hearing that Yu Howren had long discovered that he had been following him, the man in black's expression changed slightly. After a cold snort, he directly closed his eyes as if he was casually dealing with this matter. "Oh, you've got quite a backbone." The other party's unreasonable behavior didn't anger Yu Howren. He still squatted in front of the other party with a smile and said in a rather pleasant tone, "After you were knocked out by my pet beast, I used a special secret technique on you." Hearing that Yu Howren had already used a secret technique on him, the man in black's expression changed. Then he wanted to use the power of his soul to check, but found that his soul was firmly locked in his sea of consciousness and couldn't be stretched out at all. Now, unfortunately, I have to tell you that this is the first time I've used this secret technique in my life. I really don't know how powerful the secret technique is and whether there are any side effects. The change in the other party's expression just now didn't escape Yu Howren's eyes, which made him very excited and expectant. "So, even if you want to tell me now, where you came from and the purpose of following me." "Sorry, I don't want to hear it for the time being, because I want to see how effective this secret technique is, and whether it's suitable to be taught to the law enforcement Peak's punishment hall so that they have another way to interrogate their enemies in the future. Speaking of this, Howren's left index finger quickly pointed to the left side of the man in Black's chest. Seeing the man gritting his teeth and enduring the pain caused by the secret technique, Howren shouted excitedly, "Very good. It seems that your endurance is not bad. You can actually withstand the power of the secret technique at the beginning." Then his finger pressed on the acupoint on the right side of the man in Black's chest. "Not bad. You can still withstand it." Seeing that the man in black still refused to let out a scream, Howren was obviously more excited. His left finger directly pressed on the acupoint on the man in black's lower abdomen this time. As soon as Howren's finger left the acupoint, the man in black let out a heart-wrenching scream. After hearing the man in black's heart-wrenching scream, Howren persuaded with good intentions, "Don't. There are a total of 108 acupoints that can affect the human body. Now, you can't withstand the third one. How can I further test the power of the secret technique?" Chapter 408. Damn it. Ask whatever you want to know, and I'll tell you whatever I know. I won't hide anything from you. The man in black, who was originally screaming because of the pain, turned pale when he heard Howren's kind advice. The defense in his heart completely collapsed, and he couldn't help but beg. "I beg you, hurry up and remove this damn secret technique for me." What a spineless coward. Seeing that the man in black's psychological defense had completely collapsed, Howren complained with dissatisfaction. Then, he extended his finger and helped the man in black to temporarily remove the torture of the secret technique. "Who are you?" Seeing that the man in black's breathing gradually stabilized, Howren began to interrogate. "My name is Dark 179. The man in black answered truthfully. "Dark 179. After hearing the man in black's answer, Howren suddenly became nervous, because this name made him suddenly think of a super force that made countless strong people in the Tianxian continent have no choice but to fear. The specific origin. Forcefully suppressing the nervousness in his heart, Howren continued to ask. "Dark Knight." The man in black responded. It really was them. After hearing the man in black say the two words Dark Knight, Howren's heart couldn't help but sink. Dark Knight, the top assassin organization in the Tianxian continent. It was a super force that could compete with the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion and the 7 top sections. In some aspects, it was even far stronger than these top forces. In his previous life, Howren had a lot of dealings with this organization. His enemies had sent assassins to assassinate him through the Dark Knight organization, and he had also spent a huge amount of money to assassinate his enemies through the Dark Knight organization. "Which of the 4 halls of the Dark Knight, Sky, Earth, Black, and Yellow are you from?" It was precisely because he understood the origin of the Dark Knight organization that Howren needed to know more detailed information in order to determine why he was targeted by the assassins of the Dark Knight organization, or more accurately, who was it that wanted to assassinate him through the Dark Knight organization. The Yellow Hall. Hearing Howren mention the Dark Knight organization's Heaven, Earth, Dark, and Yellow halls, Dark 179 trembled and looked at Howren in surprise. In the Tianxian continent, although the Dark Knight organization was very famous, most people only knew that the Dark Knight was a mysterious assassin organization and were not clear about the internal power structure of the Dark Knight organization. How did this young man, who looked to be only 16 or 17 years old, know this? It turned out that among the 4 great halls, the Huang Hall had the lowest status and the most complicated organization of personnel. After hearing Dark 179's reply, Howren let out a long sigh of relief. It was precisely because he had dealt with the Dark Knight organization many times in his previous life that Howren understood the organization very well. Heaven, Earth, Black, and Yellow halls were the power structure of the Dark Knight organization. Among them, the Heaven's Gate that the 4 great halls spoke of was the true core of the Dark Knight organization. It was also the foundation that allowed the Dark Knight to shake the Tianxian land. In his previous life, in the Sky Hall of the Dark Knight organization, there was an assassin called Tion E who successfully assassinated a martial venerable, which instantly caused a sensation in the entire Tianxin continent. It was also because of this feat that the Dark Knight officially became a superforce that did not lose to the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion and the Seven Top Sections. However, according to the information that Yu Haoran learned in his previous life, there were very few assassins in the Sky Hall of the Dark Knight organization. It seemed that there were less than 10 people in total. The Earth Hall was the elite assassins of the Dark Knight organization and was also the main hall of the Dark Knight organization that accepted assassination missions. The Black Hall was the ordinary assassins of the Dark Knight organization. They were mainly responsible for some ordinary assassination missions and were also the hall that provided the entire organization with wealth and resources. As for the Yellow Hall, it was used by the Dark Knight organization to examine those who wanted to become assassins or those who were trained by the Dark Knight organization to see if they had the qualifications to become assassins. The assassins of this hall only accepted missions through their own methods, and then according to the execution of the mission, they could finally decide if they had the qualifications to enter the Black Hall and become a member of the assassination organization. Dark 179, how many missions have you carried out? In order to pass the examination of the Dark Knight organization, at least 3 perfect assassination missions were required to be qualified to enter the Black Hall. Therefore, Yu Haoran had to judge whether he had attracted the attention of the Dark Knight organization based on the number of missions that the other party carried out. This was because the assassins who joined the Yellow Hall would not send people to follow the first assassination mission and would not check the results of the mission after the mission was carried out. Basically, the assassins had to rely on their own honesty. After the second assassination mission was successful, the Dark Knight organization would send people to check if the assassin carried out the mission successfully and if there were any elements of fraud in the process. For the third assassination mission, the higher-ups of the Dark Knight organization would send out the elite assassins of the Earth Hall to secretly monitor and observe the assassin to see if he had the strength and potential to become an assassin of the Black Hall. First time, Dark 179 was quite depressed when he thought about how he was captured alive by the opponent during his first assassination mission. Why do you want to assassinate me? It was just that the first time he came out to carry out a mission, which was the assassination mission he received from the black market. Yu Haoran asked while guessing who issued the assassination mission in the black market. Who wants to assassinate you? My target this time is He Yu and He Ting of the He family. Originally, the He sisters were still feeling sorry for Yu Haoran's overly cruel torture methods. However, after hearing that the assassination target was actually their sisters, they suddenly felt flustered and no longer felt that Yu Haoran was cruel just now. Did you receive the assassination mission from the black market? The assassination target was actually the He sisters. Although Yu Haoran's expression did not change, he was secretly relieved in his heart. That's right. Dark 179 nodded and replied. He reached out and tapped Dark 179's neck. Dark 179 immediately fainted. After that, Yu Haoran interrogated the other 2 men in black and got the same answer as Dark 179. Black Bear, throw them in front of the beast's cave in the dense forest. After getting up, Yu Haoran ordered. Originally, combined with He Ting's introduction to the scene of the He family's annihilation, Yu Haoran speculated that the murderers of the He family were likely to be bandits who came and went like the wind. However, after someone issued the assassination mission of the He sisters in the black market, Yu Haoran felt that his speculation might be wrong. Perhaps the murderers of the He family were not just bandits. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.